The world in which the main character lived had been devastated by monsters. Humanity was forced to fight these fearsome creatures in order to survive, and the orange-haired man had spent his entire life doing just that. Day after day, he battled and defeated monsters with his sword. Days turned into months, months into years, and before he knew it, 10 years had passed as if in the blink of an eye. Slaying monsters became second nature to him. No creature could stand against his blade. After fighting for so long, he no longer feared anything. One day, a powerful and massive monster appeared and confronted him. It demanded that he give up, claiming that the world was already beyond saving. This monster was no ordinary beast. It was the true mastermind behind the world's destruction. Recognizing the orange-haired man's strength, the monster tells him to become his sword. Enraged by the monster's arrogance, the man launched himself forward without hesitation. Channeling all his strength, he leapt into the air and charged at the beast. The monster tried to catch him, but he skillfully dodged and managed to injure the monster's hand, shocking the creature. However, the battle was far from over. The monster retaliated, landing a blow that knocked the man off balance. It continued its assault, taunting him, saying no matter how hard he fought, he won't be able to defeat him. The monster's attacks were brutal. Each strike caused immense damage. Just as he was about to collapse, he steadied himself and made one more desperate charge with the strength he had left. But even his fastest strike was too slow for the monster, which effortlessly punched him mid-attack, sending him reeling. The man sat on the ground, struggling to catch his breath, while the monster loomed over him, its eyes filled with malice. At that moment, the man noticed a pendant hanging from the monster's neck. Realizing its importance, he made a split-second decision. He took a stance, preparing to throw his sword, just as the monster raised its hand to deliver the final blow. With every ounce of strength, the man hurled his sword at the creature. The monster failed to dodge in time, the blade and shattering the pendant. The monster cursed in fury, but it was too late. With the pendant destroyed, its body began to disintegrate into dust. Relieved, the man collapsed onto the ground, his eyes gazing up at the beautiful sky. The scene then shifts to a young man with black hair walking somewhere. Suddenly, sirens blared at the B-rank Namsan Gate, a restricted zone where civilian access was prohibited. A voice echoed through the speakers. Scan your hero registration number and unique identification. Unauthorized individuals are not permitted to enter. The black-haired young man continued walking through the Yongsan district of Seoul until he stood before the gate. Without hesitation, he lifted his foot and broke the gate open with ease. Immediately, the sirens blared, alerting security to an unregistered hero who had forcefully entered the gate. Calmly, the young man stepped into the field and proceeded to walk as if nothing had happened. While he walked, a group of heroes nearby noticed him and called out, asking if he was lost. One of them offered guidance, suggesting that if he had strayed into the gate by mistake, he could follow them out. The black-haired man, however, remained silent. Two of the heroes began whispering to each other, commenting on his appearance. His clothes didn't resemble those of any registered hero they knew. Assuming he was just a porter, they began mocking his outfit and the bag he carried. They speculated that he had entered the gate cluelessly, abandoned by a party that had left him behind. The young man finally spoke, calmly stating that it wasn't what it looked like. He had just arrived at the gate. One of the heroes smugly responded, claiming that being ditched was nothing new. The party leader stepped forward and said he'd seen people like the black-haired man before. He claimed to understand the type, those who thought they could survive inside a gate simply because of what they'd seen on TV. He warned the young man that such arrogance was suicidal. He went on to advise the newcomer to obtain an official hero license and complete the required training and exams. Pointing to the environment around them, he added that this was a B-rank gate, and if the young man was truly a beginner, he should start at an F-rank gate instead. Unfazed, the black-haired young man replied coldly, "I'm not thankful at all." His blunt response shocked the group. A few of the members grew angry, but their leader stopped them. He explained that people who brush off sincere advice like that only learn through experience. Eventually, the young man would realize just how unforgiving the world inside a gate really was. It was nothing like what they showed on television or the internet. As the young man continued forward, he suddenly encountered an orc monster. Without panic, he gently placed his bag on the ground and closed his eyes. The orc lunged at him with a punch, but the young man dodged effortlessly. Then, opening his eyes, now burning with rage, he charged at the orc with nothing but his fist. With a single blow, he took down the orc instantly. Even after 10 years, for this young man, nothing had changed. The black-haired man picks up the sword dropped by the goblin. He pulls out a gemstone, a low-grade magic stone. He thinks to himself that, in the past, he wouldn't have even bothered to look at such a low-tier item. Still, he places the stone into his backpack. Suddenly, several goblin monsters appear in front of him and charge to attack. He swiftly dodges their strikes and, in one fluid motion, hurls a rock at one of them and takes down the orc with a single strike. Enraged, the remaining goblins all rush toward him. Meanwhile, back with the team of heroes from earlier, the red-haired girl asks whether the rude black-haired guy might already be dead. Their leader responds that if he truly was an intruder, agents from the control center would already be en route to apprehend him. Since this is a C-rank gate, the agents dispatched would be at least B rank or higher. As long as the man doesn't act recklessly and charge into monsters, there's no need to worry. He's probably trembling in fear somewhere, just waiting to be rescued. Back in the field, a goblin trembles as it watches the aftermath of its comrades being taken down. The black-haired man leaps forward and punches the goblin square in the face. Another goblin tries to attack him from behind, but he dodges effortlessly, jumps on its back, and kicks it in the head. Without breaking a sweat, he defeats the entire group of goblins. He then proceeds to retrieve the magic stones from. As he walks deeper into the forest, he muses that today's harvest was disappointing. Only 28 stones, ranging from low-grade to mid-grade quality. Suddenly, he is confronted by 4 agents from the control center. They introduce themselves and demand his hero registration ID. If he's unregistered, they inform him he must accompany them to the control center for questioning. The black-haired man calls them annoying and turns to walk away. The agents pull out metal cuffs and warn him that they will use force if he refuses to comply. One of the agents grabs his arm to cuff him, but the man quickly shifts his position and grips the agent's wrist instead. Calmly but firmly, he tells them to stop bothering him and leave him alone. The other agents draw metallic electric rods, tools typically used to subdue orcs and other monsters. But the black-haired man knows these weapons won't work on him. He gives them one final warning. If they interrupt him again, he won't hold back. They strike him with their electric rods, but he remains still, effortlessly blocking every attack. He dodges their punches, and when one agent tries to strike from behind, he swiftly turns and lands a sharp knee to the agent's stomach, followed by a kick that sends both attackers flying. The last remaining agent glares at him in anger. In a flash, the black-haired man vanishes from sight and reappears in front of him, landing a powerful punch. As the agent struggles to catch his breath, the man asks calmly, "Do registered heroes have to deal with this kind of harassment?" The agent, gritting his teeth, replies, "As long as they don't commit crimes inside the gate, there's no reason for agents to be dispatched." The man then asks about the rift zones. The agent freezes, clearly shocked that he brought it up. Rift zones are unstable passages to other worlds, filled with bizarre monsters. Unlike gates, controlled, regulated areas where monsters are confined and the resources they drop are harvested. Rift zones are unregulated and open randomly across the globe. The items obtained from monsters have become valuable energy resources, and the government tightly manages gates as a result. Areas not yet turned into official gates are known as rift zones. The black-haired man continues, "So, no matter which gate I enter, your agents will show up and accuse me of trespassing?" The agent nods, confirming, yes. If an unregistered hero enters a gate without proper authorization, the control center is automatically alerted and nearby agents are dispatched. He then yells, "But the rift zones aren't as easily accessible as gates." Even the Hero Association won't just stand by. Before he can finish, the man grabs him by the face and throws him aside. "You're just a nobody," he says coldly. As the agents recover, one of them swears, "Next time I see you, I'll end you." But the black-haired man walks away, completely unfazed. Elsewhere, in another world, the one where the hero once defeated the demon lord, a man floats in midair, unconscious. He hears faint voices and feels as if he's being pulled into something unknown. It feels like death. He slowly opens his eyes and is shocked to see a man with black hair dressed in normal clothes. "Who are you?" he asks. The man replies, "My name is Seo Dojin. I'm dying right now, and if you grant me my wish, I'll disappear peacefully. The hero refuses. I no longer have any reason to live, he says. I fought to the death for 10 years and was betrayed by a comrade I trusted. My home was destroyed. My family, my friends, everyone I loved is gone. No matter how hard I try, there's nothing left to live for. Do you feel the same? Dojin shakes his head. Even if my life was filled with pain, I don't want my grandmother and sister to suffer the same fate. The hero sighs and asks, then what exactly do you want from me? Before Dojin can answer, the scene cuts to the Gazan Digital Complex in Seoul, specifically the Jumseong building, now commonly referred to as the Hero Complex. With the rise of gate byproduct trading, it's become more crowded than even tech companies. Dojin enters a store and approaches the counter. I'd like to sell some mana stones, he says. You've come to the right place, the dealer replies. Dojin drops a large pile of stones onto the counter, his earnings from inside the gate. The dealer tells him to wait while he evaluates and cleans them. Dojin sits calmly in a chair as the dealer begins. After counting and cleaning, the dealer says, commission fee is 40%. Total payout, 5.5 million won. Dojin frowns. I did all the hunting. Why is the fee 40%? That's just how things work around here, the dealer shrugs. If you don't like it, take your stones and leave. As Dojin reaches for his stones, the dealer grabs his arm and adds, you still need to pay for the sorting and cleaning service. I used an expensive cloth. That'll be 350,000 won. I don't have that kind of money, Dojin replies. If you want it, come take it from me. The dealer insists, warning that if Dojin doesn't comply, he'll call the C-rank security guards. Just then, 3 men walk in from the back door. They lock eyes with Dojin, tension filling the room. In the blink of an eye, Dojin knocks each man to the ground with ease. He approaches the dealer, slams his hand on the table, and firmly declares, the commission is now 1%. Then, with a calm tone, he adds, let's keep our future transactions smooth. Later, he returns home and places a stack of cash on the table in front of his grandmother and little sister. Both are stunned by the amount and immediately ask where the money came from. Dojin replies that some time ago, he lent money to a friend running a small business, and that business has now grown significantly. His grandmother, skeptical, asks since when he had friends like that. Dojin answers, you know where I grew up. He was one of the guys I used to hang out with. His little sister asks excitedly, so are we rich now? Dojin smiles and nods. Yes, from now on, we're a rich family. Overjoyed, she begins running in circles around him, laughing. As he watches her, Dojin recalls the final wish of the real Seo Dojin, the man whose body he now inhabits. That wish was simple, to let his grandmother and little sister, Eunyoung, live in the safest house in the world. Without waiting for a response, the real Dojin had disappeared, leaving the hero to wake up in his body. The safest house in Korea costs around 110 billion won. The hero, now living as Seo Dojin, has no obligation to fulfill this one-sided wish. But he tells himself that if his powers ever fully return, such an amount would be nothing to him. Compared to his destroyed world, the rifts, gates, and monsters in this one are child's play. Back there, he was revered as a sword god. Unfortunately, only a tenth of his original power has returned. A voice suddenly calls his name from outside. He excuses himself and opens the door, finding 2 men waiting for him. They're loan sharks, the same ones the real Seo Dojin had borrowed money from before his death. They demand repayment of 48 million won. Originally, Dojin had borrowed only 5 million to cover his grandmother's hospital expenses, but the debt had ballooned in a short time. They mention that since he made money from the gate, he should hand it all over. Before they can finish, Dojin punches the brown-haired thug, sending him crashing into a wall. The yellow-haired man is visibly terrified. Dojin coldly states, I already paid back 9 million won. If anything, you owe me. The man hesitates and asks, are you really the old Seo Dojin we know? Before punching him too, Dojin mutters, tell your boss. I'll be visiting him soon. Afterward, Dojin takes his little sister to a toy store. She picks something and shyly asks, can I get this? He smiles warmly. It's fine. We already bought clothes. Get whatever you like. As he watches her excitement, he reflects on how sharing the real Dojin's memories has softened his emotions. It's only love for the family for now, but it's genuine. He recalls how kind Seo Dojin had been to Eunyoung, even though she was only his half-sister. Dojin promises himself that he'll protect that part of his heart. Eun-young then picks a smaller toy and, looking down, quietly asks if she can have it. Dojin gently picks up the large plushie she originally wanted and says, "You can get both. Take whatever makes you happy." Later, he takes her to a restaurant for ramen. While they're eating, a female voice calls out his name. A blonde woman approaches, flanked by 2 guards. She eyes him critically and mocks his appearance. "What's with these clothes?" she sneers, then glances at Eun-young. "Who's the little girl? Did you start causing problems like your mother?" Her words hit a nerve. Dojin's expression darkens as he glares at her. The blonde woman approaches the little girl and asks for her name. Eun-young shyly responds with her name. The woman smirks and remarks that she must be from the Eun family, adding that, judging by her clothes, she's just as pathetic as her mother. Turning to Dojin, she tries to make a joke at his expense, asking if he agrees. She attempts to provoke Eun-young further, but Dojin cuts her off. "You're really ugly," he says coldly. "You look like an orc." Shocked by his words, the woman stands speechless. Seo Dojin was born out of wedlock and grew up in poverty. After his mother's death when he was 7, he was taken in by his biological father. For over 10 years, he endured discrimination and contempt from his father's household. But the moment the legal wife gave birth to a son, Dojin was cast aside and kicked out. He ended up living with a maternal grandmother and a half-sibling he had never met before. The hero, now in Seo Dojin's body, reflects on the pain he must have endured and promises that things will be different from now on. Stepping closer to the blonde woman, he says, "Even after living together for 12 years, you still disgust me. From your face, to your personality, even your brain. You're completely hopeless." He continues, "You envy women who are prettier and kinder than you. You cling to your inferiority complex, lashing out like a spoiled child. You're not even better than the little girl who actually cares about her brother." Infuriated by his brutal honesty, the blonde woman prepares to respond. But before she can speak, another blonde woman calls out Dojin's name. The younger woman immediately runs to her, tears welling in her eyes. "Mom," she tries to complain about what Dojin said, but her mother silences her. "Enough. Stay out of this." Then, turning to Dojin with a forced smile, she says, "It's been a while. Would have been nice if you visited once in a while." But Dojin sees right through her hypocrisy. This was the woman who tormented him the most during those 12 painful years. "You make me sick," he says. "We're not close enough to be asking about each other's lives. Don't show your face again." Her expression twists with hatred as she turns and walks away briskly, her daughter trailing behind. Dojin gently takes Eun-young's hand and walks off. In his mind, he thinks, the Seo Dojin who stayed silent despite the abuse is gone now. And for everyone's sake, they better realize that soon. Inside a moving car, the mother and daughter sit silently. The daughter finally breaks the silence. "Why did you leave Dojin like that instead of teaching him a lesson?" The mother ignores her and instead turns to Chief Lee. "Why is Dojin still alive?" Chief Lee replies, "According to our last report, he was left inside the rift zone." She slams her hand against the seat. "Then why is that kid still alive? He should have died in the rift." Chief Lee apologizes and promises to investigate further. The daughter, now visibly shaken, asks in a trembling voice, "Wait, what do you mean? Did you try to kill him?" Her mother doesn't respond. "So you did try to kill him?" She presses again. The mother turns to her and asks coldly, "Do you still have feelings for Dojin?" Blushing and stammering, the daughter replies, "It's not like that." "But what if Grandpa and Grandma find out what you've done?" Her mother falls silent, then replies, "This is something I'll handle. You do well to stay out of it and never defy me." Internally, she makes a dark vow. "No matter how many times it takes or how many methods I have to use, I'll make Seo Dojin disappear." 10 years ago, rifts began appearing across the world, unleashing waves of monsters that brought death and destruction. The world descended into chaos and widespread devastation. But just as all hope seemed lost, individuals with extraordinary powers, later called heroes, began to emerge. Their appearance helped restore order, and soon after, the discovery of magic stones, extracted from monsters, transformed everything. As magic stones replaced traditional energy sources, nations across the globe focused on converting rifts into regulated gates. Today, nearly every industrial system revolves around these gates and the heroes who enter them. In this new world, if someone wants to make money, Becoming a hero is almost the only path. Meanwhile, Dojin steps out of a taxi and walks toward what he believes is Yangdongpo's HCS capital. Inside, the two debt collectors from earlier stand behind their boss. The boss sneers. "Who do you think you are?" Dojin replies calmly. "After giving it some deep thought, I've realized you owe me. Physically, mentally, and materially. I deserve compensation for all the damage you caused." The boss raises an eyebrow, noting how much Dojin's personality has changed. Judging from how he handled his men, he suspects Dojin must have awakened inside the Rift Zone. "So, you gained something to lean on, huh?" the boss says. "But don't get too arrogant. Awakenings don't mean you're invincible. I've seen plenty of arrogant awakeners go down." At that moment, more men enter the room. These guys were full of themselves too, the boss scoffs. Even after awakening, they were still D-rank trash. "You're no different." He turns to leave, saying, "I've got enough D-ranks around here who won't even let you speak." But Dojin's voice cuts through the room. "Sit back down. I'm not done talking." One of the newcomers charges at him for disrespecting their boss. With a swift motion, Dojin snatches the man's glasses off and punches him square in the face, knocking him out. Then, one by one, Dojin begins dismantling the rest of them. Calm, efficient, unstoppable. "You don't just run a loan shark operation," he says. "You also forge IDs. If I want to start making real money, I need a hero ID." After delivering the final punch, he turns to the boss and demands, "Make me a flawless hero ID. Do that, and I won't bother you again." The room falls into stunned silence. The boss, trembling, realizes this level of power suggests Dojin might be a high D rank, maybe even C or B rank. Uncertain and afraid, he nods and agrees to deliver the ID by tomorrow. But Dojin isn't finished. He steps closer, eyes cold and piercing. "One last thing. Tell me, was it Hong Heiju who tried to kill him?" The boss hesitates, clearly aware of who she is. But his fear keeps him silent. In response, Dojin casually extends a finger and presses so hard onto the man's shoulder. The boss screams in agony. Through the pain, he confesses everything. "It was Hong Heiju. She said she hoped you'd drown in debt and die. That's all I know. I swear." Dojin narrows his eyes. "Is that why you dropped me into the Rift Zone?" The boss stammers. I didn't do that. I swear. I didn't trap you in the gate. Why would I? If you died, I wouldn't get my money back." Dojin considers his words for a moment, then mutters a name, Kong Chulwo. "He's the one who dragged me into the gate." He looks back at the boss. "Bring me everything you have on him. By tomorrow." The boss, now completely subdued, silently nods. He knows he has no other option. As Dojin leaves the room, his thoughts drift to what the real CO Dojin once asked of him. Keep them safe. That promise now feels heavier than ever. And he knows what he must do. Protect his grandmother and little sister, no matter what it takes. Dojin returns to the gate and scans the forged hero ID he received from the loan sharks. The system confirms, registration approved. However, it also notifies him that his level is far below the recommended grade. Annoyed, Dojin clenches his jaw. "Those bastards could have at least given me a higher rank on this fake ID," he thinks. He steps into the gate, which closes behind him. This is the BAM's EOM gate, a B-rank dungeon with the structure of a D-rank tunnel. Although it's technically lower in scale, the design makes solo runs incredibly difficult. Due to the narrow tunnel system, only one person can enter at a time. Unless someone is at least A rank, clearing this gate alone is nearly impossible. In the worst-case scenario, a solo adventurer might find themselves trapped, surrounded by hundreds of monsters, deep in a pitch-black tunnel with no visibility. Just then, a large yellow-green snake slithers into view. Dojin pulls out a pair of fang-like gloves, preparing for battle. Multiple snakes begin to emerge, striking from every direction, but he swiftly eliminates them all with precise, brutal efficiency. These are black fang snakes, highly venomous creatures whose poison can paralyze even with a single graze. Dojin takes down as many as he can, but they continue to spawn endlessly. After finally wiping them out, he attempts to extract magic stones, only to come up empty-handed. Just like my old world, he thinks. The drop rate for a magic stone from a black fang snake is only 3%. He'll have to hunt more if he wants results. Pushing forward, he enters a deeper section of the gate and stumbles upon the remains of fallen heroes who came before him. Looking up, he spots an enormous snake That must be the boss, he deduces. Taking the opportunity for a surprise attack, he launches himself forward and lands a punch, but his fist bounces off the creature's skin. It didn't even leave a mark. The boss snake swings its massive tail, slamming Dojin into the wall. It lunges to bite him, but he narrowly dodges. Regaining his footing, he launches another punch, but again, it proves ineffective. This monster is on an entirely different level compared to the smaller snakes. His attacks aren't doing any damage. If only I had my full power back, he thinks. This thing would be nothing. Desperately scanning the area, he spots an old sword lying beside a fallen hero. It's rusty and worn, but it's his only option. In the end, a weapon's power depends on the one wielding it. He grabs the sword, leaps into the air, and aims straight for the snake's head. With a powerful strike, he finally manages to cut through and defeat the boss, but the sword shatters in the process. Approaching the snake, he pulls out one of its massive fangs. It's too short to be considered a sword for now, but with enough sharpening, it could make an excellent weapon. He exits the gate, frustrated by the time and effort it took just to clear a B-rank dungeon. Restoring his strength is now his top priority. Thank God my old comrades didn't see me like this, he mutters silently. At the dealer's shop, a man lays out his mana stones on the table. The dealer evaluates them and states, "The commission fee is 40%, as usual." The hero complains, saying, "That's way too high, especially since I'm a regular customer." The dealer replies, "You know our rates are the cheapest around. The gate center alone charges a 5% base fee, and we don't record transactions, so there are no taxes. Considering all that, this commission gives you a clean and more profitable deal." The hero stops arguing and accepts the money. But before leaving, he asks, "What happened to your face?" The dealer has a purple bruise around his right eye. He shrugs and says, "Some crazy guy came in, beat up all the guards, and left me like this." The hero laughs and tells him, "That's what you get for hiring C-rank guards. You shouldn't focus on rank alone. Look at skill. Ranks are just for convenience. True ability is something else entirely." He goes on to give more examples, but the dealer, growing impatient, silently wishes he would just leave. As the hero finally turns to go, he says casually, "We've known each other for a while, so call me if you ever need something." Just then, Dojin walks into the store. The dealer freezes in fear and immediately yells to the hero, "That's the guy. He's the one who beat up our guards and caused all the trouble." The hero turns around and confronts Dojin. "Is that true? How can someone call themselves a hero and attack innocent people?" Feeling confident now, the dealer stands tall. He knows this hero has 7 years of experience and plenty of connections. But Dojin responds coldly, "Mind your business and get lost." The hero is visibly offended and steps toward him. But Dojin, unfazed, says, "The number one cause of death among heroes isn't monsters. It's internal disputes with other heroes." The hero freezes on the spot. Without another word, he quickly excuses himself, saying he's too busy to get involved right now, and leaves the store. Dojin turns back to the dealer, throws a backpack full of mana stones onto the table, and says, "Calculate them." The dealer opens the bag and is stunned. Every stone is high grade. Shocked, he wonders who Dojin really is. The total value comes to 150 million won. But Dojin looks disappointed. "I hunted all day for this. Just 150 million? I've got a long way to go before I can afford the safest apartment." He calmly says, "Bring me my 150 million. The dealer nervously replies, "There's still the commission fee to deduct." Dojin's eyes narrow. "Fine. Bring me 148.5 million. The dealer screams internally, "That's not how commission works." But he has no choice. He forces a smile and says, "For transactions over 100 million, I need my superior's approval." Dojin nods. "Then get it. Now." The dealer calls his boss to explain the situation, but before he can finish, Dojin snatches the phone, speaks directly to the boss, and says, "Give me my money." Then he slams the phone into the wall, embedding it. Now completely shaken, the dealer complies and hands over the full amount. Dojin leaves the store smiling, with bags full of cash. Behind him, the dealer breaks down in tears from the humiliation. 10 minutes later, a man with black hair walks into the store. It's the actual owner. He looks around at the mess and asks, "Why weren't you answering your phone? And what was that earlier call about?" The cashier, eyes hollow and voice drained, replies, "Boss, I want to quit. I can't do this anymore. The boss looks around and sees the phone embedded in the wall and the store in shambles. He realizes this is far beyond what he and his staff can handle alone. He pulls out his phone and calls someone. Gianna, I need your help. Can you come over? Sometime later, a woman with long purple hair, a white coat, and glasses walks confidently through the streets. People stop and stare, murmuring in awe. When they realize who she is, they're even more shocked. Is that Hyun-jian? She enters the store. The cashier can hardly believe his eyes. Hey, are you really the Hyun-jian? The S-rank hero. Overwhelmed, he stammers. I heard you're the boss's niece, but I never thought you'd actually come here. She smiles warmly. Yes, I'm the real Hyun-jian. My uncle sent me. He said there was trouble with a hero trying to force sell mana stones. She sits down, her expression turning serious. Her sharp eyes scan the room. Now, she says coldly, tell me everything. Dojin sat in the backyard of his house, while his little sister played nearby. With a calm expression, he closed his eyes and assumed a firm, focused posture. His thoughts were consumed by one thing: how to earn enough money to buy the safest house for his family. At his current pace of earning only 100 million won a day, it would take far too long. He needed to become strong enough to clear an S-rank gate alone. But to do that, he had to regain the power he once possessed. The problem was the mana atmosphere in this world. It was weak, limited, and nothing like the rich, flowing energy of his previous world. Even if he continued gathering mana daily as he was now, it would likely take at least 3 years, or more, for his strength to return. Obtaining a proper set of armor and weapons would help, but such equipment was incredibly rare here, even the lowest quality ones. As Dojin sank deeper into thought, his senses suddenly flared. He sensed danger. Reacting immediately, he rushed over and picked up his little sister. Stay inside, he told her firmly. Their grandmother, alarmed by his tone, asked what was going on. Then the ground trembled violently, an earthquake. But Dojin knew better. This isn't just an earthquake, he muttered, eyes sharp. A rift is spawning near the house. Outside, beams of dark mana were swirling through the air around the house. These were the signals, the portals forming a connection between a rift and the real world. Their grandmother, now frightened, asked in panic, what is happening? Dojin turned to her and said urgently, stay inside. Don't leave the house, no matter what. It's dangerous out here. He ran outside and launched himself toward one of the mana beams. Moments later, his body was pulled in, sucked into the rift. At the Seoul Hero Association building, an emergency notification appeared. A new rift has been detected in the city, a detective announced to the team leader. Where? The team leader asked, tense. Mapo District, came the response. The leader's face darkened. Another one already? The last rift was just 2 months ago. He took a breath to calm himself and issued swift orders. Contact the White Lion Guild. They're the closest to Mapo. Dispatch nearby heroes immediately before things get out of hand. What's the exact location? He asked. They scanned the data and replied. It's on top of a private residence. The team leader's concern deepened. A rift near civilian homes. This is bad. He knew the rules well. If anyone other than a registered hero entered a rift, it would lock, preventing anyone else from going in until the person inside came back out. Worse, if that person died inside, it would trigger a monster wave, a deadly 10-day event where monsters would pour out of the rift, wreaking havoc. If that happens, the leader muttered grimly, Seoul could be reduced to rubble. Who entered the rift? He asked. The agents pulled up the data and responded, CO Dojin. He lives at the residence where the rift spawned. It seems he entered trying to protect his little sister. The leader's worry grew. He's not even a registered hero. What's the probability of a monster wave if a civilian enters a rift? 99.99%, one of the analysts replied. The room went silent. The tension was palpable. With no way to intervene, all they could do now was wait. Either for CO Dojin to return or for a catastrophic monster wave to begin. Meanwhile, in another office, Hong Heeju slammed a stack of documents onto her desk. What do you mean CO Dojin has awakened? She demanded angrily. Her assistant fidgeted nervously. We haven't found any records of him joining a hero organization or registering as a hero, but we are certain he awakened during the last rift incident. Heeju's eyes narrowed, a mixture of fear and frustration flickering across her face. Hong Heeju screamed in frustration and demanded, why isn't Kong Chulwa doing his job properly? He should have finished Dojin himself instead of just dragging him into the rift. She turned to her manager and snapped, "Tell Kong Chulwa that if he fails again to kill Dojin, he'll have to pay back 10 times the money he was paid for the mission." The manager raised a hand to stop her. "There's no need to contact Kong Chulwo," he said calmly. "A new rift has appeared in Mapo, right near Dojin's house. And according to our reports, Dojin has entered it. The media will be announcing the incident soon." Hiju let out a sigh of relief. "Keep an eye on things," she ordered, her tone firm. "And don't report back until you're 100% sure he's not coming back like last time." The manager nodded and quietly left the room. Meanwhile, inside the rift, Dojin walked deeper into a dense forest. As he looked around, he was struck by how familiar the surroundings were. The forest bore an uncanny resemblance to Petishua Forest, the place he often visited during his childhood. It wasn't just similar, it was an exact replica. From the formation of the terrain to the shape of the trees and the texture of the grass, even the wind and mana in the air, it all felt identical. The sky, the clouds, everything mirrored what he remembered. The deeper he went, the more details he recognized. Eventually, he came across a path he remembered vividly from his past life. Following it, he reached the end, and just as he had hoped, it was there. The World Tree. A colossal, ancient tree the size of an entire city stood before him. At its base, a massive hollow emitted waves of mana, moving into the surroundings. He knew this tree well. It was the primordial spirit tree, the source that governed and controlled the flow of pure, high-grade mana. It was also the very reason his previous world was destroyed. When the tree had burned, the balance of mana collapsed, leading to catastrophe. Now, seeing it here, intact and brimming with life, he was in disbelief. He didn't know how or why it existed in this rift, but he was certain of one thing. He could reclaim his original mana from his past life. He entered the World Tree and sat down calmly, settling into a meditative position. He focused solely on his breathing technique and the flow of mana around him. Time passed, first a day, then 2, then 3. 10 days went by, and he did nothing but meditate. He didn't eat. He didn't drink. He simply immersed himself in deep meditation, aligning his body with the mana of the tree. While in this trance-like state, he sensed danger approaching from outside. Opening his eyes, he spotted them, volcano monsters. Humanoid creatures with pickaxe-shaped heads. He remembered them well. They were the ones who had burned the World Tree in his past life. The monsters noticed his presence and lunged toward the tree to attack. Though he had recovered much of his lost mana, he wished he had a water elemental sword to fight with. Still, he didn't let it bother him. He didn't need a weapon. Raising his hand, he unleashed a concentrated beam of mana. The blast struck the monsters mid-air, halting their advance. It was a dense mana attack, released in the form of raw energy that exploded on impact. It had been a long time since he used such a large amount of mana in a single attack. Enraged, the volcano monsters opened their mouths and began charging their own energy attacks. Dark mana projectiles flew toward him, but they had no effect. He had already surrounded himself with a protective layer of mana armor. Walking forward with confidence, he felt reassured. The World Tree was safe, and his mana was returning. Now it was time to test how much stronger he had become. He lunged at 2 monsters, grabbing both by the head, then slammed one into the other before igniting them in a burst of mana fire. With that, he confirmed it. His power was returning. Turning to the remaining monsters, he charged forward to finish the rest. If he was lucky, he'd be able to obtain mana stones as well. Smiling with excitement, he went berserk. Waves of monsters came at him, but he fought them off with ease, killing each one swiftly. After several had fallen, one finally dropped the undying ember. He picked it up, holding it in his palm, a wave of nostalgia washing over him. "I never thought I'd use this again," he thought. He crushed the ember with his hand, and it erupted into a living flame, one he could control. He had hoped to draw more mana directly from the World Tree, but in his current physical state, that was impossible. For now, the best he could do was absorb as many undying embers as he could and convert his mana into a fire attribute. He absorbed the flame into his body, taking a moment to synchronize with it. Fire burst out from him as the energy settled. He had successfully gained the fire attribute. In his past life, he hadn't even needed to use embers to manipulate fire. But now, it had taken him nearly 10 minutes to absorb just one. Refocusing his thoughts, he knew what he had to do next. absorb as many embers as possible, and reclaim his strength. Meanwhile, in the Mapo area near Dojin's house, dozens of reporters were recording every second of the rift's activity. Authorities and heroes grew increasingly frustrated as they waited anxiously for the anticipated monster wave. Among them, one hero was particularly unhappy about the situation. Bang Songwoo couldn't stop complaining. Why did Dojin even enter the rift zone instead of waiting for a proper hero to handle it? Another hero, Kim Hyunwoo, tried to defend him. He went in to save his little sister. Songwoo scoffed. That's what everyone says. He probably heard the rumors, how easy it is to awaken inside a rift, and jumped in without giving a second thought to the danger he's put everyone else in. Hyunwoo responded calmly. What did the guild master say? He told us to wait and monitor the situation. That's what we're doing. He added, rifts have appeared at the same time in the US, China, the UK, Turkey, and Switzerland. The guild master's overwhelmed. This is the first time something like this has happened on a global scale. Hyunwoo went on. I heard other countries managed to contain their rifts early. That means Korea is the only one still dealing with an active threat. Songwoo clenched his fists, growing angrier. It's all because of that idiot Dojin. If he makes it out alive, I swear I'll knock some sense into him myself. Days passed with no news or updates from the newborn rift. Eventually, the Hero Association issued a Level 1 monster wave alert. As of now, the only reported civilian involved was CO Dojin, the first and only person to enter, and he had yet to come back out. Elsewhere, Huang Changsip was watching the news. He turned to his assistant and asked, is the person they're talking about really CO Dojin? The assistant nodded. Yes, sir. It's definitely him. Changsip leaned back in his chair. What are the odds of him actually making it out alive? If he's just a civilian, the assistant replied. There's no point even considering it. The chances are practically zero. Changsip laughed. Civilian? You really think CO Dojin is some ordinary teenager? He shook his head. The Hero Association is so clueless. He added with a smirk, my guys are still recovering from the beating he gave them last time. He then asked, let's assume he's awakened. What's the probability of survival? The assistant hesitated. That would depend on his rank. It's difficult to assess without more information. Changsip nodded. You're right. Being strong in a fight and surviving in a rift are two very different things. Then his tone changed. Dojin has 2 living family members, right? The assistant looked surprised. Yes, his grandmother and little sister. What are you planning to do? With a devious smile and a glint in his eye, Changsip said coldly, we'll treat them very well for now. But if he dies in that rift, things will get a lot more difficult for them. But if Dojin survives the rift and somehow makes it out alive, they'll simply tell him they took good care of his family. Meanwhile, inside the rift, Dojin had lost all sense of time. He couldn't even remember how long he had been there. He had absorbed hundreds of undying embers, and now he possessed full mastery over the fire attribute. He could summon and control flames at will, and his resistance to fire had increased dramatically. If judged by his flame attribute alone, he had surpassed the level he once held when he was known as the Sword God. He placed his hand on the world tree one last time, a gesture of farewell and gratitude. He silently thanked it for all the times it had helped him, both in this life and in the past. He might never see the world tree again, but if he ever did, and it was in danger, he promised himself he would protect it with everything he had. After collecting the mana stones left behind by the monsters he had defeated, he turned and walked away, leaving the world tree behind. He exited the rift from the same place he had entered. To his surprise, there was no one in sight. No people, no cars, not even within a kilometer radius. The surrounding homes were completely empty. Did they evacuate the area in preparation for the monster wave? He wondered. Suddenly, he sensed a strong aura in the distance. Without a sound, he sprinted toward it. From behind cover, he saw a gathering of heroes and reporters. He recognized several faces. They were the same people he had encountered at the previous gate. If they spotted him now, he'd be in serious trouble. He needed to distract them. Channeling mana into his hand, he conjured a ball of flame and hurled it toward a distant junkyard, far enough away from his neighborhood to avoid suspicion. Within seconds, an explosion occurs. Alarms sounded, and the heroes were quickly notified. They rushed to the scene to investigate, but when they arrived, they found no clear cause for the fire. Confused, they searched for signs of ignition but found nothing. Even Dojin was impressed by the strength of the blaze. The precision, the intensity. It was a flame that even Cusack, his old comrade and the world's strongest flame mage, would admire. Cusack would be pleased, he thought with a faint smile. While the heroes and reporters were distracted by the chaos at the junkyard, the rift behind them began to shrink. Slowly, it started to collapse in on itself. By the time they realized what was happening and rushed back toward the rift, it was too late. The portal had already vanished, completely closed. And just like that, Dojin slipped away, unnoticed. Every media outlet is buzzing with reports about the rift that recently appeared in the Mapo area, now mysteriously vanished. It disappeared earlier this morning, 29 days after Mr. CO, as the public calls him, entered it. The Hero Association had anticipated a devastating monster wave, but to their surprise, and that of the entire nation, the rift closed on its own, without incident. The association has launched a full investigation to determine what caused this unexpected phenomenon. News outlets also reported on the massive fire that broke out in a nearby junkyard, further deepening the mystery. CO Dojin has now become the talk of Seoul. As he walks down the street wearing a hoodie and cap to hide his identity, he overhears people discussing him. Some call him reckless for entering the rift. Others express pity, assuming he died in vain. But Dojin doesn't care what anyone thinks. His thoughts are elsewhere. If the rift is truly gone, he wonders, then I may never see the world tree again. It's a painful realization, but he knows it's for the best. He continues walking, heading toward Chang Seep's hideout. Entering the building silently, he listens from the shadows as the staff chat among themselves. If Dojin's dead, one of them says, that means his grandma and little sister are as good as gone too. Yeah, another agrees. The boss isn't just some guy. He'll squeeze every bit of value out of them. If Dojin had survived, well, the kid had potential. He would have grown into someone powerful. But now, the boss will find a way to make use of what's left. Suddenly, Dojin steps into the light and calls out to them. Where's your boss? The men freeze, stunned by the sight of him. Meanwhile, Chang Seep arrives at the building in his car. Relaxed, he says to his assistant, now that Dojin's dead, I can finally stretch out and enjoy some peace. His assistant, Kim, replies, you've got a lunch meeting with CEO Beck today. Nothing's scheduled for the evening yet. Good, Chang Seep says. Contact Madame Kong at Le Gris Grim. Let her know I'll be there tonight. But as soon as he enters the building, his smug confidence is shattered. The scene is chaos. His men are being thrown around, the entire base turned upside down. In the center of the room stands Dojin, calm but furious. He turns toward Chang Seep with a cold, threatening gaze. Crawl to me. Like a dog. Dojin sits on Chang Seep's desk and repeats the order with more force. Crawl. Humiliated and cornered, Chang Seep has no choice. He drops to all fours and crawls toward Dojin, surrounded by his own subordinates. You're a piece of trash, Dojin says. You don't even deserve to be treated like a human being. So bark. Chang Seep tries to cling to the last shreds of his pride, but it crumbles. He barks loudly, again and again, like a mad dog, humiliated in front of his men and assistants. But Dojin isn't done. You two-faced, spineless coward, he growls. Then stab me in the back the moment you see an opportunity. Dojin looked at Chang Seep again and said coldly, I've dealt with trash like you more times than I can count. Chang Seep broke down in tears, falling to his knees and begging for his life. Please, spare me. I swear I'll be your most loyal servant from now on. Angered, Dojin kicked him in the face. Shut up. He turned to Kim, Chang Seep's assistant, and said, You're the boss now. Don't waste your life working someone like this. You're better off without him. Kim bowed respectfully. Sir, this boss has too many connections. If I suddenly take over, people will start asking questions. It's in everyone's best interest to keep Chang Seep around a little longer. Please, give him another chance. Dojin narrowed his eyes. Isn't getting taking care of people your specialty? But if you're not willing, I'll toss him into a gate myself and let the monsters take care of him. Chang Seep, now trembling with fear, screamed and sobbed. Please, spare me. I'll serve you like a servant until the day I die. He continued bowing and crying on the ground. Dojin paused, considering the situation. Maybe it's better to mold him into something useful, he thought. At least that way, it won't become a mess later. Muttering to himself, I've gotten soft. He extended his hand toward Chang Seep. Chang Seep's eyes lit up with relief. He He thought Dojin had finally forgiven him. Crying even harder, he reached out and gripped Dojin's hand. I'm sorry. I'll never betray you again. I'll serve you for the rest of my life. But the moment their hands connected, flames erupted from Dojin's palm. Dojin injures Changseep's hand severely. Changseep shrieked in pain. Dojin turned to leave, but before walking out, he looked over his shoulder and gave a final warning. This was your last chance. If even a scratch ends up on my family, I'll find every one of you, and I'll end all of you. He paused. Watch over my grandmother and my sister. Every day? And with that, he walked out. Days after the incident, Dojin was officially declared dead, since he had entered the rift and vanished along with it. Every social media platform, news outlet, and even the government believed. In reality, Dojin sat in a small cafeteria with his little sister, quietly enjoying some burgers. He wore a hoodie and a cap to keep a low profile. He knew that revealing himself publicly would bring complications and unwanted attention, something he had no interest in dealing with. Changseep had promised to find a new place for them, far from the public eye, where they could live peacefully. As they ate, his little sister paused and smiled warmly. I'm so happy we're moving out. Dojin smiled back and gently said, You'll finally go to kindergarten like all the other kids. Then next year, you'll start school. Her smile faded. She lowered her head. Concerned, he asked softly, You don't want to go to kindergarten? She nodded hesitantly. The other kids, they make fun of me. They say I don't have a mom or dad. Dojin immediately comforted her. Then you don't have to go. We'll skip kindergarten, and you'll go straight to school next year. No more bullies. She lit up again, relieved by his words. Watching her, Dojin thought about enrolling her in a respected private school, somewhere she'd be treated kindly, where no one would dare mock or belittle her. The night before, around midnight, he had met with Assistant Kim. Kim had suggested that Dojin's grandmother and sister stay in a motel for the time being. Dojin frowned. That's a stupid idea. Kim reassured him. It's a safe place. The motel is under our management. Reluctantly, Dojin agreed and went to visit them. His little sister had run to him, eyes wide with joy, hugging him tightly. His grandmother was in tears, overwhelmed to see him alive. Back in the cafeteria, his sister suddenly asked, her brother, Are you a hero too? He looked at her and smiled. Would you like me to be one? She shook her head. I'd prefer if you weren't. He raised an eyebrow. Why? Because heroes fight monsters all the time. And sometimes they die. I want you to stay with me and Grandma forever. I'd be really sad if something happened to you. Dojin was taken aback. He paused, letting her words sink in. In his previous life, in that brutal, crumbling world, he had fought monsters endlessly. He lost countless things. But somewhere along the way, he had found something truly precious, something he had forgotten. Now, in this life, if that small sliver of happiness existed here, he would protect it and live in peace. At the Korea Hero Association headquarters, Nat Tae Hwang, the founder of the institution, stood on the top floor, staring out the wide glass windows. He turned to his assistant. Still nothing? She nodded. No new information, sir. Frustrated, he muttered. If a rift can disappear on its own, it could reappear on its own too. The assistant hesitated. That kind of uncertainty is dangerous. Honestly, I would have preferred a monster wave. At least we know how to respond to those. No, he snapped, his voice firm. We're talking about the safety of our people. This outcome, no casualties, is a blessing. The assistant flinched, then bowed. Apologies, sir. Nat Tae Hwang was one of the most respected heroes in the world. Beloved by the public, many believed that if he ever ran for president, he'd win by a landslide. His influence was so great that even the most powerful corporations feared him. But he had no interest in politics or tearing down the wealthy. All he cared about was protecting citizens and preparing for the rifts yet to come. He looked back at his assistant. I don't care how long it takes. Investigate this until we know exactly why the rift disappeared. She nodded and added, The homeowner near the rift zone has agreed to sell the property. Good, he said. Make sure they're paid above market value. I don't want them left with resentment. If it brings even a small amount of comfort after losing a family member, it'll be worth it. Turning to his laptop, he reviewed reports that rifts had appeared simultaneously in multiple countries. But something didn't sit right. His assistant spoke. China and the US have already contained theirs. He shook his head. That's not the problem. It's the UK. Their trusted heroes were already deployed to other rift locations. That means Before he could finish, a loud notification pinged. His eyes widened in shock as he read the emergency alert. It was breaking international news. The rift in the United Kingdom had just turned into a full-scale monster wave. Dojin walked once again into the same dealer's shop where he regularly sold mana stones. The cashier visibly flinched upon seeing his face, trying to compose himself as he turned to the manager. "This is the guy who tried to force sell mana stones last time," he said nervously. The manager stood up and eyed Dojin. "Are you really that guy?" Dojin sighed and replied casually, "You've got good timing. I've collected quite a few mana stones and was hoping someone with higher authority would be here to handle the transaction." He dropped a heavy backpack onto the counter with a loud thud. The manager glanced at it, uninterested, assuming it was filled with the same low-grade mana stones Dojin had previously brought. "I'm not doing business with you anymore," the manager said flatly. "Take your bag and leave." Dojin looked confused. "Why not? You're insisting on a 1% commission," the manager replied. "That's a huge loss for us. I'm not willing to continue under those terms." Dojin laughed and said, "You'll regret this." The manager considered explaining the financial impact, but quickly realized there was no point. Instead, he pointed at the door. "Take your bag and don't come back." Without a word, Dojin kicked the backpack, spilling its contents across the floor. The cashier and manager's expressions changed instantly. These were no ordinary mana stones. These were hero mana stones. Their eyes widened in disbelief. Hero mana stones had a legendary reputation. Years ago, in the lab of Kharazamath, a notorious drug lord, mana stones were being dismantled to create narcotics. During the process, one of the stones unleashed its dormant power and awakened him as a hero. Since then, these unique stones had become essential for hero awakening and mana enhancement. Rarer than most, they were also used as powerful energy sources and were incredibly valuable. Seeing the pile of hero mana stones before them, both men were stunned. Dojin smirked. "If you don't want them, I'll just pack them up and leave." But the manager quickly changed his tone and demeanor. "Please, wait," he said, trying to stay composed. "Let's discuss this properly. Have a seat." They both sat down while the cashier silently began cleaning the stones. The manager, speaking much more gently now, said, "Well, 0.5% commission is a bit too low." Dojin immediately frowned. "Then I'm not selling." Startled, the manager apologized. "Wait, at least tell me why you dropped the rate even lower." "Because," Dojin said coldly, "you annoyed me." The manager bowed deeply. "I apologize for the way we treated you." But Dojin didn't care. "Spare me the groveling. Just give me a straight answer." From across the room, the cashier watched silently, fuming inside while Dojin humiliated his manager. Trying to recover, the manager began explaining. "Look, even 10% commission puts us at a loss if the buyer underbids." "I'm bored," Dojin interrupted. "Forget it. I'm not selling." Panic crossed the manager's face. "Okay, 9%. I'll take the loss." Still, Dojin remained unimpressed. "No, 8% then, please. Even my boss will kill me if he finds out." Still no. 7%, 6%, please, the manager begged. Nothing worked. Finally, on his knees and completely defeated, the manager gave up. Dojin looked down at him and said, "Fine, I'll do 1%. Out of the goodness of my heart." The manager clenched his jaw but held back from saying what he wanted to. There was nothing he could do. "Oh, and by the way," Dojin added with a grin, "I've got 7 more bags full of these back at home." The cashier and manager's jaws dropped. "Get the contract," the manager shouted. Moments later, everything was signed. The deal was sealed. Dojin looked at his phone and saw the notification. 67 billion won had just been deposited into his account. He leaned back in satisfaction. A 110 billion won mansion doesn't seem so far off now. But reality hit quickly. He couldn't keep getting high-grade mana stones from normal gates. Only the rift zones held stones of this caliber, and he needed to move through them freely. As he contemplated his next move, a notification pinged on his phone. He pulled it out and read the headline. International alert. Emergency in the United Kingdom. Citizens are advised to evacuate the endangered zone immediately. Dojin glanced at the notification for a moment, scoffed. In his past life, it didn't matter which country or association was involved. He would personally take charge and block fissure zones without hesitation. But that wasn't the life he lived anymore. Later, he took his grandmother and little sister to a high-end restaurant that specialized in grilled meat. His sister looked overjoyed, eagerly waiting for the meat to cook so she could dig in. His grandmother, however, frowned and commented on how expensive everything was. Dojin chuckled and reassured her. I've made quite a bit of money recently. You don't need to worry about the cost. Eat as much as you want. His sister didn't hesitate. She took a piece of meat straight off the grill and popped it into her mouth. Her eyes lit up in delight at the flavor and tenderness. It was the best thing she had ever tasted. Dojin called over the waitress and asked for several more premium servings. His grandmother protested. You're ordering too much. How are we going to eat all this? He smiled. It's fine, Grandma. You should eat more too. His little sister picked up a piece of meat and offered it to their grandmother. It's really delicious, she said cheerfully. With no other choice, she took a bite and was immediately impressed by the deep, rich flavor and umami. For the first time in a long while, the three of them shared a warm, joyful moment. But the peace didn't last long. While they were enjoying their meal, Hyunjoin entered the restaurant and walked straight up to Dojin. Can I speak with you for a moment? She asked. Before she could say more, Dojin looked up and replied calmly, I'm eating with my family right now. If it's business, you'll have to wait until I'm done. She was taken aback by his bluntness. Do you even know who I am? She asked. I'm Hero Hyunjoin. He said nothing. Frustrated but composed, she complied and moved to the waiting area. As expected, her presence drew the attention of everyone in the restaurant. Whispers spread quickly. People admired her beauty, her strength, and wondered what someone like her was doing sitting in a waiting room. Joyen sat silently, a little irritated. Just who is this guy? She thought. 2 months ago, he'd entered his first gate. It was assumed he had awakened during that time. Afterward, reports claimed he had died in the newly formed Mapo Rift, but here he was, very much alive. And when they met eyes, she had felt fear. His gaze and a single word were enough to intimidate her. But none of it added up. How could someone who awakened just 2 months ago already have S-rank power? Even high-ranking S-class heroes spent years climbing the ranks after their awakening. There had to be more to him, hidden abilities or secrets he was keeping. Meanwhile, Dojin and his family finished their meal. But as always, peace was short-lived. Just before he could walk over to Joyen and speak with her, a man with blonde hair stormed into the restaurant. His eyes widened when he saw Dojin. Well, he sneered with a devious grin. How'd you manage to crawl out of that rift alive? It was none other than Kang Cheol-woo, the man who had dragged Dojin into the gate under orders from his mother-in-law in a failed attempt to kill him. Kang walked closer and leaned in. Hyunjoin's eyes narrowed in frustration. She hadn't expected Kang to show up here of all places. Dojin, however, remained calm and unaffected by Kang's presence or insults. He turned to Joyen and said, You mentioned you wanted to talk about business earlier. I'll hear you out. But first, I need a favor. He glanced back at Kang, then said to her, Get my family out of here. Bring a cab, and make sure they're safe. Joyen hesitated, caught between surprise and unease as she watched the tension grow between the two. Dojin's voice was calm but firm. I've got a debt to collect from Kang. Hyunjoin quietly steps out of the Azura restaurant and gently helps Dejun's grandmother and younger sister into a taxi. She listens to Dejun, then calmly reassures his mother and sister that there's nothing to worry about, instructing them to return home. After they get inside the taxi, Joyen waves at the little girl with a soft smile before the car drives away. As the vehicle disappears down the road, she exhales deeply, feeling relieved that they're now safe. At the same time, Dejun delivers a powerful slap to Cheol-woo, humbling him instantly. Cheol-woo, shocked, grows enraged, his eyes burning red with fury. Just as he's about to retaliate, a restaurant worker intervenes. Although clearly frightened, the worker tries to de-escalate the situation, pleading with Cheol-woo not to fight inside the restaurant. But instead of calming him down, this only fuels Cheol-woo's rage. He shoves the worker away and yells at her to leave him alone. She falls to the ground, and a nearby customer rushes over to help her up. Panic spreads as the restaurant descends into chaos. Frightened patrons scramble for the exit, terrified the fight will escalate further. Cheol-woo, consumed by rage, screams that he'll kill Dejun. His eyes go blank with fury as he demands to know if Dejun really wants to die. But Dejun doesn't answer with words. He responds with strength. He slaps Cheol-woo again, this time with such force that Chilwa spins through the air and crashes to the ground. Chilwa struggles to stand. Dajun calmly approaches him, his expression firm and resolute. He reveals a devastating truth, that it was Chilwa who lured him to the gate and left him there to die. Chilwa is stunned, unable to process the accusation. Dajun's anger simmers as he says they still have many things to discuss, things that can't be ignored. Chilwa snarls in response. He mocks Dajun, calling him worthless and saying even his own father abandoned him. He taunts him further by bringing up Dajun's stepmother, claiming she wants him dead. Hearing that, Dajun silently pulls out his phone and presses a red button on the screen, telling Chilwa to repeat what he just said. Instead of complying, Chilwa hurls curses at him. An orange aura flares around his hand, asking what exactly Dajun wants to hear. Suddenly, Chilwa lunges forward. With lethal intent, he charges at Dajun. But Dajun effortlessly blocks the strike with one hand, glowing with blue mana. The impact sends Chilwa flying, and he crashes into the ground, stunned by how easily his attack was nullified. Before Chilwa can recover, Dajun dashes toward him again with blinding speed, not giving him a chance to counter. The fight turns into a one-sided beatdown. The same worker who was shoved earlier hides behind the reception desk, trembling. She fumbles to dial the police, but in her panic, forgets the number. Just as she's about to call, Joyan gently takes the phone from her and tells her to stay calm, that she'll handle everything. The worker looks up at her gratefully, feeling safer now that someone in control is stepping in. Meanwhile, Dajun continues pummeling Chilwa with relentless force. Joyan approaches the fight, astonished. She knows Chilwa is a B-rank hero, yet he's being utterly dominated. She begins to wonder, is Dajun stronger than B-rank? Could he even be stronger than A-rank? But she tells herself that even an A-rank shouldn't be able to defeat a B-rank this effortlessly. Reaching Dajun, Joyan calls out to him in a low voice, warning that if he continues, he might actually kill Chilwa. Hearing this, Dajun pauses, looking down at Chilwa before choosing to stop. Joyan cautiously asks how much Dajun truly knows about Chilwa. Dajun remains calm and confidently replies that he knows enough. He then asks why it matters. Joyan answers quickly, it does matter. She reveals that Chilwa's cousin is none other than Kang Yangpyo, an S-rank hero. Unfazed, Dajun responds that he already knows and questions if there's a problem with that. Joyan is stunned that he already knew about Yangpyo. What unsettles her more is how calmly he's reacting. She thinks to herself how frightening it is that someone can remain so composed even when facing something this dangerous. She explains that Chilwa has always acted without consequence solely because of Yangpyo's protection. This means what Dajun just did is incredibly risky. Joyan acknowledges she understands that Dajun and Chilwa share a bitter history, but warns that it would be a grave mistake to assume Yangpyo will understand or forgive this. Dajun chuckles at that, prompting Joyan to ask if he isn't afraid of Yangpyo at all. With cold composure, Dajun answers that what truly matters now is the fact that she is starting to get on his nerves. He steps closer to her, their eyes locked, both filled with fierce, intense emotion. Nearby, the frightened waitress watches with wide eyes. After everything she witnessed, she's now terrified, thinking that although Joyan had promised to take care of the situation, things seemed to be spiraling out of control. The tension continued to mount, but Joyan apologized to Dajun for visiting him without notice and explained that her uncle had asked her to meet him. She then asked whether Dajun had gone to the Gazan stoneman and sold him the magic stones. Without waiting for an answer, Joyan told Dajun to sell them to her instead. Dajun asked how many she needed. Joyan responded that she would buy everything he had. Amused, Dajun laughed, saying he possessed a large quantity of magic stones. Joyan smirked and remarked that the assets of an S-rank hero were beyond imagination. Dajun said he was willing to sell them to her, but only on one condition. Curious, Joyan asked what the condition was. Dajun replied that it was nothing major and that Joyan would be able to fulfill it easily. The scene then shifted to Dajun's stepmother, who is angered to hear that Dajun is still alive. She exclaimed that the man had claimed Dajun died while entering the new rift. One of her subordinates, visibly sweating, apologized and said that even the Hero Association had believed Dajun was dead. She yelled at him to stop making excuses and demanded to know how he planned to handle the situation. Nervously, the man hesitated before reporting something even more shocking. Chilwa had been completely defeated by Dajun. Her eyes widened in disbelief. Dejun had actually beaten Chilwa? She began to panic, wondering if Dejun already knew something. Her thoughts raced as she realized that if her husband or father-in-law found out, the consequences would be disastrous. Still, she tried to stay calm and reassured herself that she would find a way to contain the situation before it spiraled out of control. Pacing in a panic, she suddenly shouted again, saying that if this reached the media, it could crash the stock market. She ordered her staff to shut everything down immediately, control the press, cut all online communication, and, as a first step, sever contact with the police. The man informed her that they had already silenced both the press and the police. For a brief moment, Dejun's stepmother relaxed and sat down in her chair. She praised the man, President Lee, for doing well. However, he softly warned her that their measures were only temporary and that the truth could still surface at any time, as this was not a fundamental solution. He then stepped closer and whispered something even more troubling. Chilwa's cousin was none other than Yangpyo. Her eyes widened in shock. "You mean that Yangpyo? The S-rank hero?" she asked. Though many believed Yangpyo genuinely cared for Chilwa, the reality was that Chilwa had merely been a pawn, doing the dirty work Yangpyo ordered. Chilwa was infamous even in the hero world. President Lee explained that now that Chilwa had been publicly exposed, even Kang Yangpyo would not want his name associated with him and was likely already working to erase any connection. Dejun's stepmother immediately instructed President Lee to arrange a meeting with Yangpyo. President Lee nodded, understanding the urgency. She then asked if it was true that HC Capital, led by Huang Changsub, had turned against them and was now supporting Dejun's family. President Lee confirmed it. Enraged, she shouted that Huang Changsub would pay for siding with Dejun's family instead of remaining loyal to her, and she ordered President Lee to contact Prosecutor Park immediately. The scene then shifted to Dejun, who was entering a rift zone with Joyeon. There were a total of 37 active rift zones in South Korea. Of these, only 5 were on the verge of becoming real gates. The remaining ones could only be accessed by Hero Association-approved heroes, according to their assigned schedules. Hyun Joyeon showed her hero ID, and the staff confirmed her identity, wishing her good luck as she prepared. She entered the rift zone with her team. Trees surrounded them in a serene, forest-like environment. Dejun, a member of Joyeon's team, silently observed his surroundings, noting that although the rift had only one entrance, it was heavily guarded. Another hero now appears. Her name is Young Inju, an A-rank hero from the Korean Hero Association and the leader of the Cleome Guild. She approaches Joyeon and remarks that she was the one who had originally planned to hunt here. Joyeon calmly averts her gaze and responds that she didn't really have a choice and couldn't just sit back and do nothing. Then, glancing at Dejun, she recalls the condition he gave her. He would sell all his magic stones to her at market price if she let him enter the rift zone. Joyeon asks Dejun why he wants to enter the rift, and he explains that he can make more money by hunting inside. As Joyeon walks, she wonders if Seo Dejun really came to such a dangerous place just to collect mana stones. If so, it seems insane, but regardless of his reasons, she reminds herself that she still needs those stones. They finally enter the rift, surrounded by dense, green trees. Inju, wanting to lighten the mood, decides to have some fun and asks Joyeon about Dejun's true identity. Joyeon immediately replies that he's just someone she knows. Inju teases her, asking if he's really just someone, or maybe her boyfriend, clearly trying to joke. Joyeon grows annoyed and firmly replies that he is not her boyfriend. She explains that she simply owed him a favor and is repaying it by bringing him along. Inju is surprised and asks again, curious how someone like Hyun Joyeon, an S-rank hero, could possibly owe anyone anything. But Joyeon cuts the conversation short, saying it's something like that and that she doesn't want to elaborate further. Suddenly, the team senses something strange nearby. Dejun also turns his head slowly, sensing the same presence, but remains perfectly calm. The entire team grips their weapons, their eyes scanning the sky. Then, in a terrifying surprise, giant monsters resembling enormous flying birds swoop down from above and launch a sudden attack. Inju yells out in shock, recognizing the monsters. She identifies them as Cocastrians, a highly dangerous species. Joyeon reacts instantly, taking command with confidence and authority. She shouts orders, telling Inju and Doyeon to move into defensive positions and instructing Sungo to aim for the monster's legs. But before the rest of the team can act, Dejun suddenly dashes forward. With incredible speed and strength, he leaps high into the air, heading straight for the incoming monster. The sheer power and precision of his movement leaves Joyen stunned, and the other team members are equally shocked by his boldness. As he charges, Dejun gathers mana in his fist and declares that he's going to take down the first monster in the rift, and punches the monster directly in the face. That one punch is enough to knock the monster off balance, sending it crashing to the ground. Dejun lands shortly after, having defeated the creature with a single strike. One of the team members stares at the massive beast in disbelief and asks if it really died from just one hit. But Dejun responds calmly, saying the monster isn't dead yet. He then begins kicking it repeatedly, declaring that it needs to die that way. The shock and tension are evident on the faces of the entire team, including Joyen. One of the teammates steps back and quietly asks Joyen who Dejun really is, still trying to comprehend what just happened. Joyen stumbles with her answer, saying he's just a strong human. A green-haired girl protests with frustration, saying no normal human could take down a co-castrian in one hit. Joyen smiles faintly and replies that if it's only about knocking down a monster in one blow, even her sister could do it. Inju refuses to accept Joyen's answer and accuses her of speaking nonsense after witnessing what just happened, especially in an aerial battle like this. She points out that the monster didn't even manage to dodge a single strike and was instantly defeated. Inju is completely stunned, and so are the rest of the team members. Joyen's expression shifts as she looks at Dejun, her thoughts racing about his true identity. Then, with a serious tone, she tells Inju that their original plan needs to change. She takes off her glasses and puts them in her pocket, announcing that she's going to head to the center of the rift for a while. Her sudden decision startles Inju and the others. Joyen walks over to Dejun. As she approaches, Dejun tells her bluntly that he has no intention of sharing the mana stone with someone who contributed nothing. Joyen is visibly shocked, but maintains her composure and calmly replies that she had no intention of asking for anything anyway. Dejun puts the mana stone into his bag. Joyen then firmly tells him that someone as powerful as him doesn't belong in a place like this, and gestures toward a direction, asking if he wants to go deeper. Dejun smiles and says, "Sounds fun." Joyen starts walking and tells him that since she knows the layout of the area well, she'll lead the way. She instructs him to follow closely so he doesn't get lost. Without another word, she darts ahead into the forest at high speed. Dejun watches her silently as she disappears into the distance. Then, with a calm breath, he shifts into a running stance and suddenly bolts in the same direction, accelerating so fast that the ground beneath him dents from the force. Witnessing his speed, Inju remarks, "If Joyen is a bullet, then Dejun is light." One of the team members then asks Inju if they should go after them, but Inju replies with a question of her own. "Do you think we even can?" The team member admits it's impossible and says he only asked out of formality. Inju confirms that they're just sidekicks today and instructs everyone to hunt around the area as usual. She then glances at the monster and reflects that while the world praises them as A-rank heroes, in front of an S-rank, they are nothing but small fry. Watching Joyen and Dejun vanish deeper into the rift, Inju silently acknowledges that both of them are true S-ranks. The scene then shifts to Joyen running at full speed. She glances back to see if Dejun is following her, and when she doesn't see him, she considers slowing down a bit. But to her surprise, she suddenly hears Dejun's voice from her right side, urging her to run faster. Startled, Joyen loses control of her pace and comes to an abrupt stop. Dejun, confused by her reaction, also stops. Joyen stands in shock, wondering how Dejun managed to catch up with her, especially since she is ranked among the top 2 in South Korea when it comes to speed. Dejun, standing beside her, casually comments that even though she was running as if trying to make sure he couldn't catch up, she's still slower than he expected. Joyen blushes with embarrassment and quickly asks when she ever said that. Dejun's attention then shifts to a nearby mountain, and he asks Joyen what's there. She looks at the mountain and tells him that it's the location of the rift's boss monster. Dejun, unfamiliar with the concept, looks puzzled, so Joyen asks if he's ever heard of Kasserian, a massive, 20-meter-long monster that resembles a wyvern. She then firmly warns him not to even think about fighting it, explaining that it usually takes at least 3 S-rank heroes to bring it down. Dajun asks if the boss monster is the one that holds the Sang Sang grade magic stone. Joyen confirms it, adding that the boss possesses an imaginary grade magic stone, which is just one level below the highest possible grade. Noticing that Dajun seems distracted, she asks if he's even listening. Instead of answering, Dajun starts walking toward the mountain. Alarmed, Joyen rushes after him and asks if he's seriously thinking about fighting the boss monster. She reminds him that she didn't bring him into the rift for something so reckless. But before she can stop him, Dajun suddenly breaks into a run. Joyen's panic grows as she watches him, unsure of what he's planning. Realizing she has no other option, she grits her teeth and begins chasing after him. When Joyen finally arrives at the top of the mountain, she is stunned to find that the boss monster is already dead. She stares in disbelief and then glances at Dajun. Joyen is shocked. Kassirian is an incredibly powerful monster, one that even Park Haeol, a highly recognized S-rank hero known for hunting Kassirians, struggled to defeat. During his first attempt, the legendary Haeol brought 30 A-rank heroes to face Kassirian. Despite their numbers, all the A-rankers were killed, and Haeol barely escaped with his life. For the rematch, he gathered one additional S-rank and over 200 A-rank heroes. They battled Kassirian for a long time, using mana and binding magic to restrain it, giving Haeol and the other S-ranks a chance to attack. But even those powerful restraints couldn't hold Kassirian for long. It broke free with ease. Eventually, they managed to kill the beast, but the cost was enormous. Most of the heroes involved in the raid died. Haeol's mega guild, Sweet Life, still hasn't recovered from the aftermath, even 3 years later. And yet, here stands Dajun, calmly extracting Kassirian's mana like it was nothing. Dajun turns to Joyen and bluntly says that since she didn't contribute, he won't be sharing anything. The comment angers her, but she also knows that if she hadn't witnessed it herself, she never would have believed the dreaded Kassirian was taken down by a single blow. Dajun inspects the mana stone, places it into his bag, and tells Joyen that he no longer needs an escort. He'll proceed on his own. As he begins to walk away, Joyen quickly asks if he isn't going to collect Kassirian's byproducts. Aside from the mana stone, its beak, claws, and other parts hold high academic and monetary value. Dajun stops, turns back with a laugh, and replies that it's not worth the effort. Joyen falls silent at his response. Dajun resumes walking and adds that it's more efficient to spend that time gathering other monster crystals. He tells her she can take the byproducts if she wants, consider it payment for her guidance. Joyen doesn't respond. She looks at Kassirian's body and quietly says she doesn't need them. The scene then shifts to the ground below, where Joyen's team is waiting. They stare silently at several large backpacks. Dajun had borrowed them earlier and returned with every one packed full of magic stones. One team member asks Inji if she can believe what they're seeing. Inji, also staring in disbelief, remarks that it would normally take at least 20 hours for their guide to gather that many stones, or possibly even 3 full days, judging by the haul. Then she mutters, "Just who is Dajun?" Joyen sits off to the side, deep in thought, reflecting on Dajun's unreal speed and the sheer quality of the magic stones. Inji glances at her, wondering if what Joyen claimed was really true, that Dajun defeated Kassirian without any notable gear or even a protective suit. The thought alone makes Inji believe that he might be the strongest hero in Korea, or maybe even the world. While Inji is lost in thought, Dajun returns again with another massive backpack and tosses it to the ground. The team begins whispering in disbelief. He's brought back yet another full load. They murmur that even if they told others what happened, no one would believe them. They'd just be called crazy. Inji then tells the team not to speak of what happened today, even if no one would believe it. The team bursts out laughing, agreeing that she's right. Meanwhile, Joyen walks over to Dajun and begins talking to him. Inji and the others observe them from a distance, commenting that Joyen and Dajun look like they're flirting. Inji agrees, saying she should have realized something was going on when Joyen brought in some random guy. She adds that Dajun is the kind of man who can stand next to Joyen without looking out of place. Another teammate chimes in, saying that Joyen and Dajun look like the perfect visual couple. But as Inji continues watching them closely, she realizes something feels off. It doesn't seem like flirting at all. She notices that Dajun speaks rather bluntly with Joyen, even roughly at times. It makes Inji wonder who else could talk to Joyen like that. After their conversation, Dejun unexpectedly places his bag into Joyen's hands and walks away. The team watches in surprise as he leaves without even saying goodbye. Inji approaches Joyen and asks about the backpack he left behind. Joyen replies that Dejun said if word got out, he'd become famous overnight, but fame was a hassle, so he asked her to handle it quietly. Inji is stunned by the response and murmurs, "What kind of guy is he?" Joyen doesn't answer. Instead, she blushes softly and smiles to herself, wondering the same thing. What kind of guy is Dejun? The scene shifts to an oval-shaped building where someone is furiously punching a heavy bag with all his might. It is none other than Haeyeol, the S-rank hero and guild master of Sweet Life, a guild under the Korean Hero Association. He looks exhausted as he continues practicing. One of his assistants comments on how tired he seems. Trying to encourage him, the assistant tells Haeyeol to calm down and shares a saying, "The frog that crouches the longest jumps the farthest." He explains that the more Haeyeol endures these difficult times, the greater his reputation will become. Haeyeol agrees, saying the man is right. It's the only way to hit back at those who once looked down on him. The assistant enthusiastically affirms this and adds that the more Haeyeol strengthens his body, the more powerful he will become when the time is right. And when that moment arrives, everyone will bow before him. Continuing to flatter him, the assistant says there's no one in the world who knows how to conquer a Caesarian better than Haeyeol. Haeyeol reacts at the mention of the monster. The man presses on, claiming that one day, Haeyeol's name will be remembered as the hero who conquered Caesarian with the smallest team in history. He hands Haeyeol a water bottle, adding that the Hero Association might even grant Haeyeol exclusive rights to Caesarian. Haeyeol takes the bottle, laughs, and agrees that no one knows how to handle a Caesarian better than he does. He then reflects on the disastrous incident 3 years ago when battling a Caesarian nearly destroyed his guild. But despite that, Haeyeol remains confident that he's still the only one capable of capturing that monstrous bird. He turns to the assistant and asks if he's right. The man quickly and sweetly agrees, saying, "It can't be anyone but the guild master." The scene then shifts to another location, where Yang Pyo is reviewing biographical data on Dejun, curiously studying the files. Yang Pyo, who is none other than Dejun's cousin, is an S-rank hero under the Korean Hero Association. Standing beside him, his assistant confirms that Dejun is the man who defeated Cheolwoo. A few months ago, Cheolwoo had attempted to eliminate Dejun by dragging him into a gate, but instead of dying, Dejun awakened his abilities as a hero. The assistant continues, explaining that the client behind the attempt was Hong Hyeju, the exclusive director of T Group, and also the daughter of the powerful W Group. Yang Pyo raises an eyebrow and wonders why a high-society chaebol princess would target someone like Dejun. The assistant then reveals the twist. Dejun is actually the illegitimate child of Hyeju's husband. He was brought into the family at the age of 7, but 6 years ago, after Hyeju gave birth to her own son, Dejun was cast out. Yang Pyo laughs at the absurdity, saying that even if Dejun is related by blood, it clearly doesn't mean much in a chaebol family. Then Yang Pyo stands up and asks his assistant how much Cheolwoo was paid for the task. The assistant replies that Cheolwoo was paid 3 billion won. Yang Pyo scoffs and asks again if that's really all. He then grabs a hockey stick and questions whether Cheolwoo is a complete wreck now after getting beaten by Dejun. The assistant confirms, saying Cheolwoo didn't just lose the fight. He was brutally beaten, suffered severe burn injuries, lost his eyesight. Hearing this, with a dark smirk, Yang Pyo mutters that Dejun is ruthless. The assistant continues, informing him that Jian was also spotted at the scene. As a result, rumors are spreading that she helped Dejun. This makes Yang Pyo furious. He storms toward his assistant and demands to know why Jian would help Dejun, wondering aloud what kind of relationship the two share. The assistant begins to sweat nervously and, with a trembling voice, says he doesn't know. However, he adds that thanks to Jian's testimony, the police closed the case quietly. Enraged, Yang Pyo shouts at him to immediately investigate and find out what kind of connection exists between Jian and Dejun. Yang Pyo says that if there's nothing going on between them, then they must have made some kind of deal, and he wants to know exactly what that deal was. His assistant, visibly frightened, immediately rushes out, saying he'll find out right away. Meanwhile, Yang Pyo is so furious that he snaps the stick he was holding and throws it to the ground. He thinks to himself that sooner or later, Hiju's people will come to him, asking him to finish the job he failed to complete. After thinking for a moment, Yongpyo concludes that it's fine. Hiju is a chaebol woman, so she'll have plenty of money. The thought of that makes him smile. The scene then shifts to Dejun, who is walking down the street, thinking about how he had estimated that rift hunting would be more efficient than gate hunting, and it turns out he was right. However, he wonders if this means he'll have to rely on Joyen to enter and exit rift zones. He then recalls a conversation they had at the rift. Joyen had told him that if she sold the Caesarian Mana Stone, people would start questioning who killed it and whether they could prove their abilities. The media would be all over her day and night. Because of that, she decided to keep the Mana Stone in storage for the time being. She also told Dejun that if his goal was to become famous, she wouldn't stop him, and asked what he planned to do. After hearing that, Dejun simply handed her the bag without saying a word. Now arriving at his new home, arranged by Changsip, Dejun tells himself that he needs to find another way to access the rift zones. But for now, he'll rest. However, when he opens the gate to his house, he notices a large number of shoes at the entrance. Inside, his younger sister turns around and sees that Dejun has finally arrived. The house is filled with people. She runs to him and hugs him tightly. Confused, Dejun asks about the people inside. A man with brown hair steps forward and introduces himself as Prosecutor Park from the Seoul District Prosecutor's Office. With a sharp gaze, Park asks Dejun if he knows Changsip. Dejun stays silent. Park then continues, informing him that he is under emergency arrest for participating in an illegal high-interest loan operation run by Changsip, the CEO of HCS Capital. At the prosecution service, Dejun sits alone in a small room when his heightened senses pick up someone approaching while speaking on the phone. The man is saying that there's nothing to worry about. Both Changsip and Dejun are behaving quite obediently. The man is Prosecutor Park, who thanks the person on the other end of the line for taking care of his daughter, who is studying abroad. Before ending the call, he asks the person to give his regards to Hong. Park then looks at Dejun sitting silently and mutters that the very reason he became a prosecutor was to isolate society's trash from decent people. He enters the room and throws a file onto the table, beginning the interrogation. With a cold tone, he asks what Dejun has been doing all this time, stating that the charges listed against him alone would be enough to put him behind bars for 10 years. Park then shows Dejun a document, claiming he has already gathered more than enough evidence from Changsip to bring him down. Dejun looks at the file, but remains silent. Park grows agitated and curses at him, shouting if Dejun thinks he's bluffing. Calmly, Dejun asks, "Is all of this Hiju's doing?" Startled by the question, Park tries to play dumb and pretend he doesn't understand. But Dejun reads his expression and demeanor, confirming in his mind that Changsip's side has already been eliminated. Dejun had come quietly to avoid trouble, but now he realizes his family may be in danger as well. Park steps closer and asks where Dejun heard such things. Then, wearing a menacing expression, he growls, "Do you think Korean prosecutors are pushovers?" He declares that Dejun's life is now finished. At that moment, Dejun glares at Park with killing intent. The look in his eyes terrifies Park, who begins to sweat. Still, knowing he holds power within the prosecution office, Park raises his hand to slap Dejun. But just then, another prosecutor opens the door and tells Park he's needed outside for a moment. Park exits and is handed a report. Upon reading it, his eyes widen in disbelief. He asks if the machine is broken. The other prosecutor confirms it's not and says he even double-checked. The equipment is functioning normally. Park stares at the results, confused. According to the hero detector, Dejun is shown as an ordinary person. It makes no sense to him, as they're staring at the test result document. The other prosecutor admits he's just as baffled and suggests that the earlier reports of Dejun's awakening may have been incorrect. But Park knows that can't be true. The information came directly from the T group. He begins to question Dejun's true identity, especially since he also knows Hiju's name. Meanwhile, in the room, Dejun finally understands why Korean prosecutors are often called incompetent. It makes him seriously consider smashing the building, taking his grandmother and Yunying, and fleeing somewhere safe. As he's deep in thought, the door opens. Joyen enters and asks what he's doing. Dejun responds honestly, "I'm not really sure myself." Joyen tells him not to act rashly. She understands how frustrated he must be, but warns that if he uses his powers now, the situation will only get worse. Dejun asks if she's planning to help him. Joyeon shakes her head and says, "It's not that." She explains that she knows he hasn't done anything wrong, and because he's innocent and being falsely accused, she feels she has no choice but to set things right. Dejun lets out a faint laugh. Then Joyeon leans closer and whispers that the Hero Association will begin investigating him soon. They're already keeping an eye on his fake hero license and the recent incident in the Mapo Rift. Despite all that, Dejun's main concern remains his family. He asks Joyeon about them. Her voice wavers slightly as she snaps. "Do I look like your assistant? Why should I be the one checking on your family?" Dejun says nothing and simply looks at her. Unable to hold her composure, Joyeon turns away and starts walking toward the door. As she reaches it, she mutters without turning back, "Your family is safe." Hearing that, Dejun smiles and thanks Joyeon, saying that he won't forget this debt. Joyeon is pleased to hear that and tells Dejun to endure the hardship a little longer, promising that she will resolve the situation as quickly as possible. Joyeon's chosen method wasn't simply proving Dejun's innocence. Instead, she exposed Prosecutor Park's bribery and illegal dealings, which led to Park's dismissal. Following that, a fair investigation confirmed that Dejun had nothing to do with the recent incident. However, despite being cleared, Dejun couldn't escape punishment entirely due to his unauthorized hero license. But thanks to Joyeon's strong defense, he got away with just probation. Later, Dejun and Joyeon are sitting in a car when a news broadcast comes on. The reporter announces that a previously unseen monster has appeared in England and is attacking civilians. They describe the creature as a mantis-like monster, approximately 1.5 meters tall, with 4 eyes and impressive jumping ability. Hearing the description, Dejun tells Joyeon that the monster is called a Macassian, which startles her. She nervously asks how he knows the monster's name. After all, it's newly discovered, and only the association knows its name at this point. Dejun remains silent. Monsters are not given arbitrary names. Magic stones contain not only condensed energy, but also unique embedded information. By analyzing this data, one can learn specific details such as a monster's name. In modern-day Earth, science is used for this analysis. But in the world that was destroyed, the one Dejun came from, it was done through magic. In other words, if the same monsters exist in both worlds, Dejun naturally knows their names. Dejun then tells Joyeon that Macassians can be easily dealt with using the fluid from red flower ants. Joyeon looks confused, so he explains further. Although red flower ant fluid is harmless to humans, it acts as a highly potent paralytic toxin to Macassians. If sprayed on them, it can immediately stop their rampage. Joyeon, growing more suspicious, asks Dejun who he really is. Dejun remains silent. As Joyeon continues driving, she notices that Dejun is ignoring her, not even listening to what she's saying. Then, without warning, Dejun quietly asks, "What would happen if I just got rid of Hong Hiju?" The scene shifts to Hiju, who is anxiously biting her nails, while President Lee watches her, sweating nervously. He informs Hiju about the current situation. She then asks why Joyeon is helping Dejun. President Lee replies that it's unclear what kind of relationship the two share. This only makes Hiju more anxious. She stands up abruptly and demands to know what it means that Dejun isn't actually a hero, even though President Lee previously said he had awakened. President Lee responds that he doesn't know either. It's evident that Dejun awakened, but perhaps he has some ability to deceive the hero detector. Instead of calming her, this explanation only enrages Hiju further. She tells President Lee to contact Yongpyo and says she's willing to pay him 30 billion won to defeat Dejun. Yongpyo, however, instantly refuses the offer and tells his assistant to inform Hiju to double the amount. Yongpyo's assistant questions if that's not too excessive, but Yongpyo lifts a finger and scoffs, saying it's nonsense, because from Hiju's perspective, there's no alternative but him. Once the job is done, 60 billion won will be nothing to her. Besides, now that Joyeon is involved, and she's an S-rank hero, it's only natural that the price goes up. The assistant acknowledges that Joyeon is definitely dangerous, but before he can finish, Yongpyo slams his foot on the table and storms toward him, shouting furiously that he knows nothing. He demands to know if the assistant truly thinks all S-ranks are the same. Yongpyo declares that he could defeat a mere player like Joyeon in just 20 minutes. Terrified, the assistant quickly agrees and admits Yongpyo is right. Yongpyo then laughs and asks if the association has responded. The assistant replies that due to local circumstances in the UK, the budget cannot be increased any further. He adds that the Hero Association has already publicly stated that they are carefully selecting a hero to dispatch. Yongpyo is annoyed by the association's stance, muttering that they're making it difficult for him to even decline the mission openly. He criticizes the association, saying they're worse than thugs, and asks for the scheduled departure time. The assistant informs him that they'll depart in 3 days on a joint flight with a Japanese hero. Upon hearing they're headed to Japan, Yongpyo seems satisfied, saying he was planning to visit Takashi there anyway. Then, he brings up the Macasians, a newly discovered monster whose weaknesses haven't been identified yet. Yongpyo laughs, thinking that if he manages to uncover their weakness, his reputation will skyrocket. Meanwhile, in Cambridge, UK, chaos unfolds. Civilians are fleeing in terror as Macasians attack the city. Many heroes are on the scene trying to stop the monsters. One of the Macasians charges at them, but the heroes manage to dodge and regroup into their best formation. After a fierce battle, they finally succeed in killing one of the Macasians. Exhausted and barely standing, the heroes are horrified to see more Macasians approaching rapidly and launching another wave of attacks. The British heroes do everything they can to slow the advance, but without clear information on the monsters, they are overwhelmed. With Cambridge's defenses collapsing, the Macasians are now less than 60 kilometers from London. Suddenly, during the assault, all the Macasians look up at the sky and collapse to the ground. It's the red flower ant fluid, dropped from a helicopter. The helicopter is filled with S-rank and near S-rank heroes from Japan and Korea. As the Macasians writhe on the ground, it becomes clear that Joyen was right. The red flower ant sap is extremely effective against them. The monsters are unable to endure it. Other heroes begin praising Joyen. One black-haired hero, however, is skeptical and wonders how Joyen could possibly know this. Something doesn't add up. Joyen then turns to the group and instructs them to finish off the Macasians while they still have the advantage. Without hesitation, the heroes jump from the helicopter to eliminate the remaining enemies. After neutralizing the threat, the team returns to Korea. At the airport entrance, a large crowd of reporters waits to greet them. Joyen is hailed as the standout hero of the UK expedition. Reporters applaud her for discovering the Macasians' weakness and credit her with saving countless lives. One reporter remarks, "Joyen is truly a hero. She saved the British from despair." Another agrees, calling her the best hunter in the operation. As Joyen and the other heroes step through the arrival gate, reporters bombard her with questions, asking how she discovered the Macasians' weakness. Cameras flash as reporters shout for her attention and continue their interviews. News outlets across Korea announce that a group of 200 people, including Joyen, has safely returned. Joyen's brilliant strategy and leadership during the UK expedition become national headlines. Korean heroes save England. Meanwhile, Daejun walks through the streets of Korea, watching the news on a nearby screen. Footage of Joyen's heroic actions plays, followed by an interview with Yongpyo. Seeing Yongpyo's face on screen makes Daejun's expression turn dark with anger. Joyen and Daejun arrive at a restaurant, and Joyen hands Daejun some presents. While sipping coffee, Daejun asks what the gifts are for. Joyen explains that one is for Yunying and their grandmother, and the other is for Daejun himself. Hearing that, Daejun picks up his gift to open it, but Joyen tells him to wait and open it at home, saying there's no need to open it here. Still, Daejun opens it and finds some stylish clothing inside. Joyen tells him it's a small token of appreciation for his help. Because of him, she became a hero. She adds that compared to what she received from Daejun, it's just a light gesture, and if he ever needs a car, she could buy him one too. Daejun puts the clothes in his bag and casually replies that he'll let her know if he needs a car. He then tells Joyen that he'll also be needing her help in the future. Joyen remarks that Daejun won't answer even if she asks how he knew the Macasians' weakness. Daejun simply asks if he's required to answer. Joyen sighs deeply and changes the topic, asking about his future plans. She isn't expecting a lofty answer like world peace, but she worries that if he targets Hiju or Yangpyo, things could become dangerous. Daejun responds that the first thing he plans to do is buy a new house. Joyen is caught off guard by the answer. She wasn't expecting that. She asks if he's currently living in a rented place. Daejun stays silent. Meanwhile, On a private island, Yang Pio is lounging in a swimming pool, but his mind seems elsewhere. He's deep in thought, especially about Joyen, how strangely she has changed. The fact that she even knew about the Macasion's weakness makes him suspect that she's hiding something. He recalls the flight back to Korea, where he asked Joyen about Dujun. Not only had she exposed a prosecutor who was targeting Dujun, but she was also present when Dujun fought Chiolwo. Joyen had remained quiet, then replied that Chiolwo was the one who started the fight and had failed in his attempt to take down Dujun. He picked the fight first, she had repeated. Hearing that, Yang Pio had laughed, saying it was Chiolwo's fault for getting blinded by a small sum of money. Then, with a wicked grin, he moved closer to Joyen and said that, regardless, Chiolwo was still his cousin, and that gave him justification to take revenge on Dujun. Joyen had looked at him for a moment, then turned away, saying she was going to sleep. "Do whatever you want," she had said. "I'm not getting involved." Her response had surprised Yang Pio. In that moment, he realized that the relationship between Joyen and Dujun wasn't as significant as he had assumed. Joyen had made it clear she didn't want to get involved in any more conflicts. Back on the island, he murmurs to himself, convinced there's definitely something going on with Dujun. In England, in the region of Long Sutton, the Shrubbery, a place devastated by a previous monster wave, the British Hero Association is deploying as many heroes as possible into the rifts. 2 low-ranking heroes stand guard at one rift, while higher-ranking heroes are inside collecting magic stones ahead of the anticipated second wave. As they stand watch, the 2 guards chat. One says it's a shame the Macasians were defeated so easily with red flower ant fluid. "Even D-rankers like us could have taken one down," he says. The other guard agrees. "If we'd blocked the wave earlier, it would have been a great opportunity to harvest magic stones," he adds. Once a rift has experienced a wave, it can't be converted into a gate. Then one of them notes that he's heard the second wave won't bring more Macasians. "There's going to be a different kind of monster this time," he says. The other man replies that it's terrifying because they have no idea what kind of monster might come through. They've even heard rumors that rifts like this have wiped out entire countries overnight. One of the guards senses something unusual and turns toward the rift's entrance, feeling as if something is emerging. They assume it's the raid team returning, even though it's only been 5 hours since they entered. The guards quickly compose themselves and remain alert, knowing that when the team comes out, civilians might try to steal magic stones. Suddenly, the rift begins to glow, startling the guards. But what emerges isn't the hero's party, it's someone else entirely. A man with scars on his face steps out of the rift. Realizing he's not one of the heroes, and seeing his scarred appearance, the guards immediately become alert and try to contact headquarters. But the man raises his hand and summons a green magic circle. The magic circles lift the guards into the air, entangling them midair as the man calmly walks forward. One of the guards attempts to attack with a knife, but the man effortlessly counters it with his magic. "They're too weak," the man says coldly, then clenches his fist. The magic violently spins the guards, making them scream in agony. Suddenly, the green mana shifts to black, gathering in one spot and forming a device that looks like a floating screen. The screen displays 19%. The man mutters, "It's only been 10 years since I arrived in this world, and it's still not even at 20%. He wonders if he failed, even after pouring all his effort into opening a dimensional rift. Then, as if reaffirming his goal, he says, "First, I need to increase my mana consumption." One of the injured guards weakly asks for his identity, but the man ignores the question. He charges toward them and strikes the final blow, muttering coldly, "I'll start by getting rid of you." In Paju, Korea, Dajun walks through the area with a large backpack slung over his shoulders. Suddenly, he senses the presence of a nearby monster. A worm-like creature bursts from the ground, drills through the earth, and disappears back underground while Dajun observes calmly. He places his hand over the hole created by the creature and senses that it's about 100 meters deep, and there are approximately 26 worm-like monsters below. Dajun then casts a fireball spell, curious to see how many of them will survive. He throws the fireball into the hole, and moments later, a series of fiery explosions erupt from multiple holes in the ground, forcing the monsters to the surface. While some of them are taken down, others survive, bringing a faint smile to Daijun's face. Meanwhile, in an unknown building, a group of individuals holds a meeting about Dejun. A white-haired man inquires about what kind of person Dejun is. A man wearing glasses responds. He's a difficult young man to deal with. He insisted that he's a hero. This man is Min Honki, the deputy director of the Korea Hero Association. The white-haired man asks if Honki said Dejun's strength couldn't be measured by the hero meter. Honki clarifies that Dejun didn't say anything about that specifically. Park Sang-yeol, the vice president of the Korea Hero Association, expresses his frustration, calling Dejun impertinent for not answering the association's questions. Honki states that, "There's one more thing." The white-haired man prompts him to continue, and Honki explains that Dejun claimed everything started with Cheolwa's evil scheme. The scene cuts back to Dejun, who is engaged in combat with the worm-like monsters. Honki's narration continues. After awakening during the gate raid where he nearly died, Dejun took revenge on Cheolwa and later handled the new rift in Mapo entirely on his own. Dejun casts another fireball spell, effortlessly wiping out several monsters. Honki acknowledges that Dejun's actions may be excessive, but one thing is certain, his strength is overwhelming. The white-haired man sits back in his chair and remarks, "Dejun is like a wild horse, hard to tame, but undeniably powerful." Honki adds that Dejun also applied for an official hero license and requested to skip the normal procedure, claiming he had a guarantor. This piques everyone's interest, and the white-haired man asks who the guarantor is. Honki reveals he named S-rank hero Joyan. The room falls silent in shock. Meanwhile, Dejun finishes off the last of the worm-like monsters and pulls out his hero card. He is now officially recognized as Korea's 8th S-rank hero. Dejun smiles, relieved. Thanks to this license, he can now hunt freely in rift zones without restriction. Back in the meeting room, the white-haired man chuckles and asks, "So Dejun went straight to Payu the moment he got his certification?" He's clearly impressed. Honki nods in agreement, praising Dejun's decisiveness and ability to act swiftly. Sang-yeol, stunned, shouts in disbelief. He entered a second-degree rift alone without any guild or allies. Is he insane? The white-haired man says nothing, simply turning to Sang-yeol with an intimidating glare. Sang-yeol starts sweating under the pressure and finally says, "If he returns alive, we'll need to reveal his identity and promote him." Dejun is now the 8th S-rank hero of Korea. Honki interrupts, cautioning that Dejun may not want to reveal his identity, and suggests that they ask for his consent first. Sang-yeol argues, if another S-rank hero appears during these turbulent times, it will bring comfort to the people. He then turns to the white-haired man, who is the president of the Hero Association, and asks if he agrees. The president remains silent for a moment before replying, "I understand your reasoning," and then stands up, announcing, "I'll meet Dejun myself." Meanwhile, Dejun continues battling the worm-like monsters, using the opportunity to practice new combat techniques. With a single attack, he takes down multiple enemies. As the dust settles, Dejun finally acknowledges something important. His mana consumption rate is no joke. He comes to a conclusion. He needs a weapon. At the Gazan Hero Complex, a brown-haired man is playing a game on his mobile phone when someone suddenly opens the door to his shop. It's none other than Dojin. The man asks Dojin to provide the name under which the reservation was made, but Dojin doesn't respond. Instead, he walks up to the counter, places a bag on it, and says he wants to try making a weapon using the materials inside. Without even looking up from his game, the brown-haired man dismisses him, stating that only those with a reservation are allowed. He bluntly tells Dojin to leave and try another store. Dojin grows irritated because he had heard over the phone that there were many reservations, but he knows the man never actually took any. Hearing this, the brown-haired man finally looks at Dojin and insists they're fully booked, claiming they don't have the time to take on more clients. He advises Dojin to visit another shop, mentioning that all the craftsmen in the area are quite skilled. Frustrated, Dojin grabs the man by the collar, shocking him. Nervously, the man sets his phone on the counter as Dojin asks if he's the shop's owner. The man says he's the son of the owner, prompting Dojin to demand he call his father immediately. Dojin explains that he came to their shop specifically because he heard it was one of the best. The man goes to call his father, saying there's a customer who wants to meet him. Soon, his father, Choi Chokwon, a renowned hero weapon craftsman, emerges and asks Dojin who recommended their shop. Dojin replies that Jian sent him, shocking both Chokwon and his son. Confirming the name, Chokwon asks if Jian really told him to come. Dojin opens his bag and pulls out some materials, which Chokwon instantly recognizes. He grabs them, visibly surprised. His son, confused, asks what they are, and Chokwon reveals that they're the tips of a giant black killer fang, something he hasn't seen in a very long time. Now realizing Dojin is serious, Chokwon agrees to craft the weapon. Dojin requests a long, sleek blade. However, Chokwon advises against it, explaining that with non-metallic materials like these, stretching the blade too long would reduce its durability. Instead, he proposes making 2 medium-sized blades. Dojin, unimpressed, questions if Chokwon is just admitting a lack of skill, bruising both of their egos. He insists on a single long sword, suggesting that the 2 blades be fused. He also explains that he wants to maximize mana absorption. Angered, the son shouts that he can't believe what he's hearing, accusing Dojin of insulting their skills. He defends his father, stating that all his weapons have at least grade 3 mana absorption. At this, Dojin stops talking and picks up a nearby sword. He examines it and estimates it to be around grade 5. Then, channeling mana into it, he grips it tightly. Chokwon and his son watch in shock as the sword shatters into pieces. After that, Dojin says that if they're going to create such garbage, they might as well stop now. Chokwon's ego continues to take a hit, but he endures it. The scene then shifts to a rift, where an orc warrior monster with glowing red eyes is on a rampage. Dojin approaches the orc and forms a mana blade to fight it. The orc attacks with a powerful kick, but Dojin dodges and leaps into the air, striking down at the orc's shoulder. The orc screams in pain and becomes even more aggressive. It grabs a tree to use as a weapon, but Dojin clearly breaks down the tree in half with his mana blade and charges at the orc, landing a deep strike. However, the orc begins regenerating. As soon as it recovers from the blow, Dojin swiftly attacks from behind, striking using his mana blade and taking down the orc using fire spell. Exhausted, Dojin struggles to maintain the mana blade, finding it increasingly difficult to hold for extended periods. He opens his bag, takes out a container, and collects some of the orc's material. Thanking the mana blade, because of it, he was able to defeat the creature known as a Cyclops. That night, Dojin returns to Chokwon's shop and gives the container to the brown-haired man. The man shakily asks what it is. Dojin doesn't answer directly and simply tells him to inform his father that, with this, he can now easily connect the 2 black killer fangs. Confused, the brown-haired man asks again what's inside the container. Dojin grabs his bag and walks away as the man shouts behind him. As Dojin leaves the shop, he thinks to himself that he has gathered all the basic materials. But to enhance mana absorption, he still needs one more thing. And there's only one place on Earth where he can find it. The scene shifts to a swimming pool where people are enjoying their time. Juyin, relaxing poolside, receives a call from Dojin. She picks up and casually asks why he's calling. After finishing the call, Jian relaxes and enjoys the view while Inji sits beside her, sipping juice. Jian asks Inji if the association has decided to send a hero to Brazil. Inji confirms, saying that both the Brazilian government and the association have joined forces to close the rift zones on a large scale. She adds that the monsters in Brazil are particularly violent, but they drop a lot of mana stones, and the salary from the association is decent, so her guild has decided to participate. Inji then invites Jian to join them and suggests she bring Dojin along. Jian becomes flustered, prompting Inji to mention the rumor that Dojin is secretly the 8th S-rank hero. Jian hesitates and says she isn't sure. Inji questions her uncertainty and teases her about another rumor, that she and Dojin are in a special relationship. Jian grows anxious and asks what Inji means. Finding her reaction adorable, Inji compliments her and hugs her, revealing that she saw Jian and Dojin sweetly sharing a Casterian. Jian starts blushing and tries to come up with excuses but fails, eventually telling Inji she'll ask Dojin. Inji thanks her, but Jian still warns that she doesn't know if he'll agree to come. Meanwhile, at the workshop, Chokwon is forging Dojin's sword and is stunned, wondering how Dojin figured it out. He uses the Cyclops material Dojin gave him, which begins fusing materials, some not even metallic, together as if they were melted and bonded. Chokwon wonders if Dojin knew that Cyclops materials could be used in such a way. Just then, Dojin enters the shop, standing confidently with a smile. Chokwon tells him he'll try to make the sword as long as possible, just as requested, estimating a length of about 180 centimeters. Dojin informs him that the sword should be crafted as a two-handed weapon but adjusted so it can be wielded with one hand, specifying a weight of 5 kilograms. Chokwon is surprised to hear Dojin suddenly speaking so politely. He had assumed Dojin was just a thug, but now sees that he actually has manners. Looking at the materials, Chokwon begins to suspect the weapon must be truly precious to him. Chokwon advises that 5 kilograms is quite heavy to swing with one hand, and warns that Dojin won't just be swinging it once. But Dojin insists that it's fine, he wants it that way. He then asks how long it will take to complete. Chokwon estimates that the deadline would be at least a month. Dojin wonders if a grade 7 weapon can really handle his full power. He decides that he'll need it, and tells Chokwon to focus on shaping the form for now. As for enhancing mana absorption, Dojin says Chokwon can do that later, after he brings the necessary material. Chokwon is shocked, wondering if Dojin actually managed to acquire such a rare material. Days later, Dojin is walking through the city when Jian surprises him with a brand new car. Dojin thanks her, and Jian casually replies that it's nothing, then teasingly asks if she looks small in his eyes, since he only asked her for a cheap 1 billion won car. Dojin responds that it's just about right, making Jian blush. As Dojin examines the car, Jian asks if anything happened with the Hero Association. Dojin replies that they said they would make his information public, so he told them to pay him if they intended to do that. Jian responds that the association president is already doing a lot of good for him. Dojin opens the car door and tells her that's exactly why the negotiation fell through. Jian urges him to try to get along with them, adding that it would be nice if he considered her situation too, since she's his guarantor. Dojin shuts the door without responding. Jian then gets in the car as well, mentioning that the association is currently busy preparing for the Brazil operation. She then buckles her seatbelt, saying that once things settle down, the Hero Association might try speaking with the president again. Hearing this, Dojin asks if they're really going to Brazil. Jian confirms it, explaining that they plan to completely shut down some of the rift zones. As Dojin's arm lightly touches hers, he asks if she's going too. Her face flushes red, and in a polite tone, she confirms that she is. When she asks him why, Dojin casually decides to go along with her. Jian blushes even more. The scene shifts to Hiju, who is turning red, but from frustration. Yangpyo is demanding even more money to finish the job. He laughs wickedly, telling her that this isn't the time to pinch pennies. Hiju yells that she already paid him a 3 billion won advance, and now he wants even more. Standing up angrily, she demands to know when he plans to finish the job and declares she should have hired someone else. But Yangpyo only laughs and says no one else would accept a job like that. Hiju snaps back, saying there are plenty of people in the world willing to do the job for cash without asking questions. Yangpyo replies that her intel is seriously outdated and offers her some free advice. He reveals that Dojin is actually an S-rank hero, ranked 8th in Korea. Despite the shocking claim, Hiju doesn't believe him. Yangpyo scoffs, saying he paid good money for that information, and if she doesn't believe him, she can just wait until Dojin takes her down himself. As he begins to leave, Hiju stops him and anxiously asks again if Dojin is really an S rank. Fear creeps in as she realizes she may be in over her head. Still, she agrees to pay Yangpyo even more. She just wants Dojin gone no matter what. Yangpyo grins and replies that while the money is great, he also wants a strong business partnership with Hiju moving forward. She shouts that she'll do whatever it takes. He just needs to make sure Dojin dies. Just then, Yangpyo receives a phone call. He smirks and says it seems the heavens are smiling on Hiju. When she asks what he means, he explains that they now have the perfect opportunity to eliminate Dojin. Meanwhile, the Korean heroes prepare for their departure to Brazil. Several individuals are reviewing their profiles and discussing the 5 S-rank heroes selected for the raid. The lineup includes Jang Sung-go, Park Hae-yeol, Jian, Yangpyo, and finally, a rookie named Dojin, who remains unknown to the world. Soon, the plane arrives in Brazil. At the Brazil Hero Association headquarters in Sao Paulo, a meeting is underway just before the arrival of the Korean heroes. One of the officers reports that the Korean expedition team has just landed at the airport. A black-haired officer responds that it's good news, noting that the Korean team is the fastest among all the nations that responded to the call. A long-haired officer adds that some of the Korean heroes skipped lodging altogether and jumped straight into action, commenting that it's typical behavior for what he calls the hurry-up nation. However, he expresses concern that the Korean team might uncover confidential information. A mustached officer calmly replies that no secret lasts forever, so they only need to keep things tightly under control until the mission is complete. All the officers agree and approve the directive. The mustached man then exhales deeply, thinking about Brazil's national treasure, Hero Moray, who was recently killed by an unidentified entity. According to the black box recording, the attacker wasn't a monster but a human-shaped figure. He silently wonders what really happened near the rift in Santrum. Soon after, the Korean heroes arrive at the Brazilian Hero Association and begin a meeting to receive a situation briefing. Dojin is notably absent, prompting Jian to text him, asking where he is since the meeting has already started. Dojin replies that he's still on the plane, but Jian knows he's lying. He got off with them earlier. Dojin then reveals that he redirected his route and is now headed to Santrum. Jian is shocked to realize that Dojin went alone to the most dangerous rift zone. Meanwhile, the official conducting the briefing informs the other heroes that they'll be deployed to their assigned rift zones in order, following 2 days of local adaptation. After the meeting ends, Jian collects her luggage and hails a taxi. Just as she's about to get in, Yangpyo grabs the door and asks where she's going, pointing out that their schedule hasn't even started yet. Jian calmly tells him there's a place she needs to check out. When Yangpyo asks where, Jian replies that she's going to Santrum. Yangpyo watches her leave, puzzled and concerned, wondering why she's heading toward the one place the association warned them to avoid. At the rift zone near Santrum, Dojin, Jian, Inji, and several other heroes are on the move. Jian asks Dojin to explain why he's in such a hurry. Dojin replies that he waited for them, but they arrived too late. Jian counters, saying that if he had just told her in advance, he wouldn't have had to wait at all. Dojin exhales and stays silent, prompting Jian to insist he tell her what he's really after. Dojin finally reveals that he's hunting a blue croco. Jian, confused, asks if that's the only reason he came all this way. Dojin looks at her and asks if he needs another reason. Jian then reminds him that she's 3 years older, implying that he should speak respectfully. Dojin looks surprised, and she adds that she's been using polite speech the whole time, so he should do the same. While Inji enjoys watching their bickering, Jian tells Dojin that he's way too casual in the way he talks. Nearby, a black-haired hero asks a brown-haired one if it's really okay to enter the rift zone like this. The brown-haired man reassures him, saying Jian is with them and she's highly skilled. But the black-haired man points out that the one leading the group isn't Jian, it's the rookie, Dojin. Hearing that, a red-haired hero turns back and tells them that there are different levels of rookies. He says that if it's Dojin they're talking about, then he might just be the most legendary rookie ever. Both men are stunned by the remark. Meanwhile, Jian and Dojin are still arguing. Jian asks if Dojin came here intending to shut down the rift zone. Dojin snaps at her, telling her to stop talking. He came all the way to Brazil just to gather materials, and he's determined to make the most of it. Jian, still confused, asks what he means by materials, but before he can answer, the group is suddenly attacked by a monster. The brown-haired hero blocks the first attack. The team reacts quickly and forms a battle stance. The red-haired man stares at the monster and shouts that it looks even scarier than in the pictures. The brown-haired man begins to panic, wondering if it might be too dangerous for them. Suddenly, they hear a voice yelling at them to step aside. It's Dojin. He draws his sword, remembering Chokwon, who had told him that retrieving the blue croco's heart by hand would be extremely difficult. So, Chokwon had lent him his prized sword to aid in the mission. With a firm grip on the blade, Dojin charges forward and defeats all the monsters in a flash. Everyone, including the black-haired and brown-haired heroes, is left stunned, realizing just how insanely powerful Dojin truly is. Later that day, the scene shifts to the team's campsite. The entire squad has set up camp and is finally taking some time to rest after a long, intense day. A few of the guys are gathered around, casually chatting among themselves. The topic of conversation? Dojin. They're still in disbelief over what happened earlier. One of them exclaims how Dojin managed to take down the blue chrono in a single strike, a feat none of them could even dream of pulling off. Another chimes in, saying he lost count of how many monsters Dojin had defeated on his own. It was simply incredible. The group can't stop praising Dojin's strength and composure, clearly impressed by his power. Then, one of the brown-haired team members leans in and lowers his voice, glancing around to make sure no one else is listening. "Keep this between us," he says, but Dojin also took down a coca strain the same way. The others go wide-eyed with shock. "You mean that massive bird-type monster?" one asks. "He took that down too?" Now it all makes sense to them. Dojin isn't just some strong guy. He's on another level entirely. There's no way he's an ordinary hero. The scene then transitions to Dojin himself, who is calmly cooking near the campfire. Joyen walks over, curious about what he's doing. She asks if he's finished sorting out the remains of the Croco monster. Without looking up, Dojin gestures at the neatly organized remains and says he's already done. Joyen blinks, caught off guard by how fast he worked. What in the world is he going to do with all that? She wonders silently. Then her attention shifts to the fire. Her brows furrow as she points at the meat on the grill. "What are you cooking? That doesn't look like beef." Dojin casually replies, "It's blue Croco monster meat. It's edible. Want to try some?" Joyen recoils slightly, completely shocked. "Wait, what? That thing's meat is edible? But we brought enough food, didn't we? Why would you go out of your way to eat that?" Still chewing, Dojin simply shrugs. "If you don't want it, you don't have to eat it." Unbothered, he takes another bite while Joyen watches in disbelief. Meanwhile, Inji walks up, catching the scent of something unusual. Her eyes land on the grill. "Are you seriously eating that?" she asks. "We have plenty of food. Why go through the trouble of cooking monster meat?" Before Inji can protest further, Joyen surprisingly takes a seat and picks up a piece of the grilled meat. Inji gasps, "Are you seriously going to eat that?" Joyen replies, "Dojin said it's edible." She takes a bite, and to her own surprise, it's not bad. In fact, it's actually kind of good. Inji is stunned. "No way." Unable to wrap her head around what just happened, Inji approaches Dojin and lowers her voice. "Okay, what's your secret? How did you win Joyen over?" She's never even had a boyfriend before, and she's not the kind of person who falls for guys easily. "So what's your dating secret, huh? What made her eat that?" Dojin blinks and pauses for a moment, as if her question triggered a deeper memory. His mind drifts back to his days at the Imperial Academy, before he turned 20, when Lady Maisel Grain, of the prestigious Grain Count family, had taken an interest in him. Later in his mid-20s, there had been Rowenda Leshlian, the young heiress of the Leshley family. And then, in the final days of his life in the destroyed world, there was Veronica, his final resting place, a bittersweet memory. Inji's voice cuts through the moment. "Hey, are you even listening to me?" Snapping out of his thoughts, Dojin turns toward her and answers, "Honey doesn't seek out the bee." Inji stares at him in disbelief. That is the cheesiest line I've ever heard. Joyen, meanwhile, is going in for another bite of the meat. Alarmed, Inji quickly rushes to her side and tries to stop her. "Don't eat that again." The scene shifts once more, this time to the city of Sao Paulo. Yang Pio, a high-ranking official, is in his office when his assistant enters with an update. The assistant informs him of the current situation unfolding with Dojin and Joyen. Yang Pio is clearly baffled. "I still don't get it," he mutters. "The operation hasn't even officially started. Did they really move that fast just for free food?" The assistant nods, explaining that Joyen's Violet Magnolia Guild appears to be working with Dojin. Yang Pio then asks if there are any valuable monsters located near Santrum. "Not that I know of," he continues. "I've asked around, even consulted Brazilian officials, and all I've heard is that the area is extremely dangerous." The assistant nods. Everything involving Dojin is always unpredictable. Yang Pio sighs, and just then, his phone rings. It's Director Hiju. He answers. "Director Hiju? What brings you here?" The director doesn't mince words. "Dojin is still alive. When are you actually going to do your job?" Yang Pio leans forward. "Why are you pressing the issue now? Did something happen?" Director Hiju's tone grew serious. "Dojin's father may have seen the news about his son becoming an S rank. He contacted me personally and told me to bring Dojin back home." Yang Pio exhales deeply. Things were getting even more complicated. Upon hearing the update, Yang Pio and muttered, "So even the chairman of T Group is stepping in now." No wonder Director Hiju is all worked up. Clearly agitated, Director Hiju snapped through the phone. "This isn't the time for sarcasm, Yang Pio. We need to act. What exactly are you planning to do?" Yang Pio's tone grew colder, more resolved. I've finally found a proper partner for this operation. I'll make sure it doesn't end on a sour note. Dojin will not be returning from Brazil, no matter what. Director Hiju paused for a moment, then said with grim satisfaction, "Now that's the kind of answer I like to hear." Without another word, Yang Pio replied, "Glad you get it," and abruptly ended the call. He turned to his assistant, who stood silently by his desk. "Get in touch with Takashi's side," Yang Pio instructed. "Understood," the assistant responded immediately. Yang Pio then narrowed his eyes at the map in front of him. Dojin walked right into a remote zone. That's going to make our job much easier. The scene shifts to the dense forest of Brazil, where Dojin, Joyen, and several other team members are steadily making their way through thick jungle foliage. Joyen steps closer to Dojin and says with concern, "You do realize we're heading deeper into the jungle, right? According to the information from the Brazilian Hero Association, monsters have been spotted in this region." Dojin glances at her and asks, "What kind of monsters?" "A lynx," Joyen replies seriously. Dojin raises an eyebrow. "A lynx? So that monster is here too?" Startled by his familiarity with the creature, Joyen asks, "Wait, you know about the lynx?" "Of course I do," Dojin responds without hesitation, already pushing deeper into the forest. Watching him move ahead so confidently, Joyen sighs and murmurs to herself, "I knew this would happen." Then, raising her voice, she calls out, "I'm not going to stop you, but at least take this." She hands him a small item. "What's this?" Dojin asks. "They're earplugs," Joyen explains. "If you get lured by the lynx's cry, your mind could become paralyzed." The Brazilian Hero Association strongly emphasized that. "Didn't you just say you knew about the monster?" Dojin looks at the earplugs but casually replies, "I don't need them." Joyen stares at him in disbelief. "You can't underestimate a lynx, Dojin. The association specifically said they're extremely dangerous and must be handled with the utmost caution." But Dojin doesn't respond. Instead, he simply continues walking ahead, ignoring her warning entirely. The rest of the team exchanges uneasy glances, hesitant but following behind him. As they press on, Joyen continues trying to reason with him. "Dojin, please just be careful. I'm serious about this." Before she can finish, something catches their eye. Perched high on a thick tree branch, its body relaxed but eyes eerily alert, sits a sleek, menacing creature, the lynx. The entire team freezes. An overwhelming silence falls. "That's it," Joyen whispers. "That's the lynx." Inji immediately snaps into action. "Everyone cover your ears." Now, without hesitation, the party members scramble to comply, shielding their ears as quickly as possible. Panic sets in for a brief moment, but then they notice something strange. Dojin is standing alone, right in front of the monster. He isn't moving. He isn't flinching, and instead of facing the lynx, he's gazing up at the sky, completely calm, unbothered by the danger perched only a few meters away. The lynx perched on a tree branch began to howl, forcing everyone to cover their ears, everyone except Dojin. Juyin, surprised, wondered why Dojin wasn't affected. Without hesitation, Dojin charged forward, unleashing his fire magic directly at the lynx. To everyone's shock, the oppressive pressure from the lynx's howl suddenly disappeared. The creature fled into the forest, and Dojin immediately gave chase. Inji, startled, questioned what Dojin had done to silence the lynx's cry. Both Juyin and Inji hurried after him, only to be stunned when they came across nearly a dozen more lynxes waiting in the trees. One of them attempted to use its eyes to control Juyin's mind, but Dojin quickly shielded her vision and explained, "It's not the cry that paralyzes, it's their eyes." Shocked, Juyin and the others followed his advice to close their eyes. With his sword in hand, Dojin advanced. Channeling his fire magic, he ignited his blade and combined it with the refined Bandian swordsmanship. His hair shifted, his eyes glowed, and he entered the first form. Kilida Milagro, the miracle born from a single point. A blazing fireball formed at the tip of his sword. The party members looked on in awe, realizing this was no ordinary technique. Dojin launched the massive fireball, striking the lynxes with overwhelming force. The impact shook the area, and the others shielded themselves from the blast. When the dust settled, nearly all the lynxes had been defeated in one strike. Jian could hardly believe it, calling the feat impossible. However, one lynx managed to survive and attempted to escape. As it tried to use its powers against him, Dojin stepped forward, swung his sword, and ended the fight in a single, decisive strike. With that, he absorbed the lynx's power, the very ability they used to control their opponents. Afterward, Dojin and the others ventured deeper into the forest. Inji and Jian were deeply impressed that Dojin had faced all those lynxes alone, and they couldn't help but keep their eyes on him. The other party members whispered among themselves, calling his strength unbelievable. They even wondered if Dojin had surpassed human limits, perhaps even rivaling Shanri Alphonse or Kane Lester, the world's strongest heroes. Still, they admitted that might be going too far. As they pressed on, undead began appearing nearby. Suddenly, countless undead emerged from a pond, swarming toward them. One party member remarked that the creatures seemed completely unaware of their situation, while another replied that it was natural since undead lacked awareness. As the horde charged forward, Dojin stepped up and defeated one with a single punch. Then, moving with incredible speed, he struck down nearly all of them in a decisive blow. The party stood in astonishment, overwhelmed by the scale of his power. Moments later, the scene shifted. Jian asked Dojin where he had learned his unique swordsmanship, the technique with the red spark that spread everywhere. Surprised, Dojin asked why she wanted to know. With a smile, Jian replied that she wanted to learn it as well. In his mind, Dojin thought that in such a peaceful world, Jian wouldn't need such dangerous techniques. Out loud, he told her that even if she learned it now, she would rarely find a reason to use it. Frustrated, Jian thought to herself that there was a limit to being ignored. As an S-rank hero, she believed she deserved to learn. She told Dojin she would get to use it at least once before her life ended. So why wouldn't he teach her? Dojin remained silent, staring at her. Feeling dismissed, Jian said she understood what he thought of her. Watching their exchange, Inji wondered what was going on between them. She eventually called the group together, instructing everyone to prepare to leave the rift. They all shouted yes, in unison. As they departed, Inji thought to herself that thanks to Dojin, they had cleared the rift without casualties. Next time, she believed they would be able to shorten the process even further. As Inji exited the rift, she suddenly heard arguing voices. Recognizing them, she quickly ran forward. There, she found Dojin with Jian, who was blushing, and in front of them stood Ryoma Takashi, the S-rank hero and guild master of Taigoku. Ryoma stepped closer and told Dojin that today, Troman had planned to enjoy hunting with Jian, and now Dojin was interfering. Angered, Ryoma ordered him to step aside before things escalated. Dojin calmly remarked that it seemed Jian's so-called companion didn't care much about her. Surprised, Jian realized Dojin could understand Japanese. He explained that he roughly understood it. Ryoma, angered by the reply, began releasing his aura and demanded to know what Dojin had just said. One of his subordinates stepped forward, shouting at Dojin to bow his head and apologize. Another warned him to recognize who their leader was. With a serious expression, Dojin replied that he wasn't interested and told them to back off. As Ryoma and Dojin stared each other down, Inji thought nervously to herself, "That's the Taigoku Guild, ranked among the top 5 in Japan. Ryoma is infamous for his temper. Even for Dojin, this could be risky." She stepped in, urging both sides to calm down. But Ryoma brushed her aside, saying it wasn't a place for a child to interfere. Shocked by the insult, Inji's party members grew angry, demanding Ryoma show respect to their guild master. Inji quickly silenced them, then introduced herself formally as a member of Korea's Violet Magnolia Guild. She insisted it would be best to settle the matter here. Ryoma dismissed her guild as unheard of and told her to wait. He then grabbed Jian's arm, telling her to come with him. But Dojin immediately intervened, stepping in front of her. Ryoma suddenly struck Dojin, claiming he had business with him too and would deal with him later. Hearing this, Dojin realized this confrontation had been planned from the start. Accepting the provocation, Dojin retaliated with a powerful strike, sending Ryoma crashing back toward his subordinates. With a calm smile, Dojin told everyone to stay back, reminding them that Ryoma had thrown the first punch, so this was self-defense. Ryoma's subordinates, enraged, prepared to step in. Dojin warned them firmly that this was a one-on-one fight, and they should stand down. Seething with fury, Ryoma stood back up and ordered his men to retreat, declaring that he would handle Dojin personally. Meanwhile, Jian thought to herself in worry, "I just hope Dojin doesn't seriously injure him." Everyone was shocked when Dojin kicked Ryoma, sending him crashing to the ground. Frustrated, Ryoma quickly stood up and backed away, his face filled with confusion. He couldn't understand how Dojin possessed such overwhelming strength, so different from the rumors he had heard. Looking at Dojin, Ryoma thought to himself that if this continued, his life might truly be in danger. Terrified, he attempted to flee, but in an instant Dojin appeared in front of him. With a serious expression, Dojin stated that Ryoma had picked this fight because someone else had ordered him to. He added that he already had a guess about who was behind it. Ryoma froze in shock at Dojin's words. As Dojin placed his hand firmly on Ryoma's head, Ryoma trembled and begged him for mercy. But Dojin firmly refused and struck him with a powerful punch, knocking him to the ground. The entire party was stunned. Inji, though not surprised by the outcome, admitted this fight had been far more one-sided than she expected. Jian remained silent, clearly troubled. Dojin, however, didn't stop. Seeing this, Inji remarked that if it went on any longer, Ryoma's life could be in danger, and she urged Jian to intervene. Jian stepped forward and pleaded with Dojin to stop, warning him that Ryoma would be seriously injured if he continued. Dojin replied that he would take responsibility, but Jian, shocked, asked what kind of responsibility he meant. She firmly told him not to do anything that would force him to carry such a burden. Dragging him away, Jian reminded him that Ryoma and people like him weren't worth it. Dojin responded that he had met many people like Ryoma before and told her not to worry, but Jian ignored his reassurance. Meanwhile, Ryoma's subordinates rushed to his side. Dojin, still frustrated that Jian had stopped him, was calmed by Inji, who told him not to let himself be dragged down by people like Ryoma. Jian added that Ryoma and his men had surely learned their lesson. Inji then stepped forward and demanded answers from Ryoma's subordinates. She warned them to cooperate if they didn't want to end up like their leader. Nervously, they bowed and promised they would not cause trouble again. Dojin, however, declared that wasn't enough. He ordered them to bow their heads to the ground. Panicked, they immediately obeyed, begging for forgiveness. Dojin then demanded they admit their fault and vow never to repeat it. Reluctantly, they repeated his words, leaving Inji and the others smiling in satisfaction. The scene then shifted to Paulo, inside the Hero Association headquarters in Brazil. A representative from the Brazilian branch reviewed the report of the incident, his expression filled with disbelief. He looked at Inji and Jian, thinking to himself how impossible it was to believe that an S-rank hero like Ryoma had been defeated so completely, and by a single opponent. With Ryoma left gravely injured while the rest of the party remained unharmed, the truth was undeniable, even if difficult to accept. The Brazilian Hero Association had hoped Korea and Japan would cooperate to close the Santrum rift. However, after reading the report, the official announced that if the account was accurate, Brazil would no longer involve itself and would leave the matter to the Korean and Japanese associations. Inji acknowledged his decision. The official then asked if anything unusual had occurred in the rift. Inji replied that nothing special had happened, though Jian silently wondered about his words. The official noted that Dojin's name appeared most often in the report and asked why he hadn't come with them. Jian answered that Dojin had said he needed to finish things. The scene then shifted again, this time to a hospital, where Dojin arrived to meet Ryoma. Stunned to see him, Ryoma froze in silence. With a calm but serious tone, Dojin told him to remain still, explaining that he was there officially for a hospital visit. Then, using the power of the lynx's eyes, Dojin compelled Ryoma to speak the truth. Under the effect, Ryoma admitted that his own recklessness had caused problems for the Korean guild members. Without another word, Dojin left the room, clearly displeased. Rumors about the clash between Korean and Japanese heroes spread rapidly. News reports stated that Takashi was taken down with a single strike, and because of these reports, public support for Dojin began to skyrocket. During an exclusive interview, however, Dojin barely responded, sometimes only nodding blankly or giving the shortest possible answers. Before leaving, reporters commented that although the interview was brief, it was intense. They said his silence conveyed more than words ever could. The video of this interview quickly went viral, with online reactions praising him, saying things like, "That's CO Dojin." The scene then shifts to the Hero Association building, where Nat Tae Hwang, after reading the reports, remarks to his assistant that Dojin has managed to sweep away all domestic issues at once. The assistant agrees, saying the situation is truly explosive, as news about Hero CO Dojin seems to surface every single day. But the assistant also wonders aloud if it's true that the Japanese Hero Association has completely abandoned the investigation. Huang replies that he heard Takashi himself, the victim, had said so. Huang doesn't understand this at all, since Takashi always seemed to be scheming or trying to pull something. To him, this can only mean there is something Japan itself wants to avoid. The assistant then asks what exactly Huang means by that. Huang admits he isn't sure, but his instincts tell him that soon everything will revolve around Dojin, and he fears the balance of world heroes might be shaken. From there, the focus shifts to the Hero Association's preparations, as the operation to close the Brazil Rift is just one day away. Korean heroes who had arrived early were already adapting to the unfamiliar environment, interacting with heroes from around the globe who had gathered afterward. Together, they shared strategies for joint operations, as well as more detailed, individual plans. To encourage morale, a pre-battle celebration was held, and the star of the evening was undoubtedly Co. Dojin. At the celebration party, Dojin, dressed sharply, spoke with other heroes. Inji observed that the rumor of Dojin defeating Takashi had clearly gone global, since everyone who approached only seemed to want to talk about that single event. Yet, despite the attention, Dojin never bragged about it, which Inji found incredible. She even remarked that compared to Dojin, both she and Juyin seemed like ordinary people. Juyin, however, remained silent. Seeing this, Inji noticed that Juyin's face looked unusually stiff, as if she wasn't even listening. Curious, Inji wondered what exactly Juyin had noticed. Then she saw it. Dojin was talking with a stunning woman. This woman was Gloria Tyler, America's S-rank hero, who also happened to be ranked #1 in the most beautiful hero poll worldwide. Irritated, Inji suddenly slapped Juyin, surprising her. Inji teased that Juyin's mood was already soured enough, and questioned why Juyin was just sitting there instead of going over. Confused, Juyin didn't understand what Inji meant at first. But soon, Juyin found herself walking toward Dojin, cheeks flushed. Seeing Juyin approach, Dojin smiled warmly. Gloria, noticing Juyin's arrival, excused herself, telling Dojin it was fun talking with him. Before leaving, she casually called Dojin Castle. Juyin, startled, asked Dojin who Castle was. Dojin calmly replied that Castle was just another name for him. Juyin was shocked to hear that Dojin even had an English name. Dojin explained that it was simply a name he used in the past. Juyin, however, couldn't help but wonder, had Dojin lived abroad as a child? Yet, when she had checked his records before, there had been no mention of such a thing. Pouting, Juyin thought to herself, why didn't Dojin ever tell me about that name? Meanwhile, Kong was watching the scene closely. He thought to himself how pathetic Takashi was, unable to even handle someone like Dojin. Kong decided he might have to take matters into his own hands. As he drew closer, he overheard Juyin telling Dojin to be careful. She acknowledged that while she knew Dojin was strong, enemies were not always fair, and Takashi had allies who couldn't be underestimated. Just as Juyin began listing their names, Dojin cut her off and told her to forget about it. Juyin, surprised, asked why, since Dojin should at least know who his enemies were. But Dojin dismissed it, saying those kinds of people were just like Takashi, cowardly and weak, only pretending to be tough. In his eyes, they weren't a problem at all. Hearing this, Kong was filled with rage and swore to himself that he would personally defeat Dojin with his own hands. Later that night, the scene shifts again. Inji, accompanied by her party, commented that it was the first time she had ever seen something like this. They were now at the rift zone near Santrum. She looked at the entrance of the rift and noted how dark and murky it appeared. One of her party members reassured her, saying there was nothing to worry about since they had 2 S-rank heroes with them, and that they should hurry to close the rift. Inji agreed, telling herself that with such strong heroes here, what could possibly go wrong? With that confidence, she told everyone to enter. As they moved inside, Dojin suddenly seemed tense, as if he had sensed something unusual. Juyin, noticing this, asked if something was wrong. Dojin asked her if she couldn't sense it too. Juyin, confused, pressed him further, and then turned to Inji, asking if she noticed anything strange. Inji shook her head and said she didn't. But Dojin's expression grew more serious. He explained that the concentration of mana had suddenly risen. At the same time, the scene shifted to a tree nearby, where a monster crouched on a branch. The creature checked its power level and noted that it had already reached 23%. Smirking, The monster said it wouldn't take long to reach 30%. As it gazed at Dojin and the others, it muttered that things would be easier if they all just died here. Suddenly, all the party members began to feel an overwhelming pressure weighing on them. Meanwhile, Dojin realized with sharp clarity that the quality of this mana was unlike anything he had encountered before. It was far denser, even more so than what he had experienced in the Perpetua forest. Jian looked at Dojin, realizing it was her first time seeing him this tense. That alone confirmed it for her. There was definitely something dangerous here. A few moments later, Inji told her teammates to calm down. She explained that this strange heaviness they were feeling seemed to be a natural characteristic of this rift zone. Their bodies were heavier than usual, so she firmly warned them not to let their guard down. Inji then gave clear instructions. She told Jian to focus on protecting the formation as much as possible, and she told Dojin to do the same. Jian nodded and replied that she would carry out the task, while Dojin agreed as well. In his mind, Dojin thought carefully that until they figured out why the density of mana had changed, sticking to formation and staying defensive was the safest approach. Inji then reminded everyone that no matter what happened, their objective was clear: to close the rift. She urged them to stay sharp, and with determination in her voice, she told the team, "Let's move forward." All the members responded in unison with a loud yes. Around the same time Dojin was entering the Santrum Rift, at another rift zone near Manaus, the largest city in northern Brazil, a joint team of French, Korean, and Brazilian heroes had been dispatched to close a different dungeon. The scene shifted to this rift, where chaos unfolded. Most of the heroes were struggling and even being defeated by the monsters inside. The creatures they were facing were known as killing bees, large flying wasp-type monsters. One of the hunters cried out in disbelief, unable to understand how this could be happening. By all standards, killer bees were supposed to be monsters that even C-rank heroes could hunt down with relative ease. Yet here, even A-rank heroes were falling one after another against these swarms. At that very moment, a monster saw an opening and lunged to strike a hero. The hero, pushing through his exhaustion, landed a desperate punch and managed to take the incoming bee monster down. But the victory was short-lived. Dozens more monsters filled the air, and his body felt unbearably heavy. Because of that strange pressure, he couldn't use his powers properly. Confused and increasingly worried, the hero wondered grimly how many of them would actually make it out of this nightmare alive. The focus then shifted back to Dojin and his team. Inji dodged a sudden strike from a charging monster, and everyone quickly realized they were now facing a group of black orcs. One of the party members muttered in shock, wondering since when black orcs had become this strong. Inji remained silent, her expression tense. Two members of the team quickly moved to strike the orc from behind and unleash their spells, landing a direct hit. But to their horror, the black orc stood completely unscathed, as if the attacks were meaningless. Without hesitation, the orc countered, swinging its massive weapon. But before the strike could land, Jian rushed forward and saved the two party members at the last moment. Grateful, they thanked her for protecting them. Jian, however, scolded them firmly, telling them not to rush in recklessly. Then, in a blur of motion, Jian charged forward and confronted the black orc head-on. The orc swung its axe down at her, but Jian swiftly activated her technique, dodging the strike with incredible speed. She pivoted, turned around sharply, and landed a precise kick to the orc's head. Without wasting even a second, she leapt into the air and delivered another powerful kick, this time sending the monster crashing down. At that moment, another black orc charged at her, raising its weapon. But Jian vanished in an instant, and the strike landed on the wrong target, another orc, leaving the creature stunned. The next moment, Jian appeared behind the orc that had attacked her and landed a devastating kick that sent the massive creature flying into a nearby tree. The other party members were stunned. Watching the display, they realized that because of Dojin's overwhelming presence, they had almost forgotten just how powerful Jian truly was. She wasn't just skilled, she was a genuine S-rank hero as well. They found themselves in awe of her ability. Suddenly, another orc roared and was about to charge, but before it could take a single step, Dojin appeared in front of it and delivered a single, earth-shaking punch that dropped the monster instantly. His strike silenced the battlefield for a moment. Meanwhile, Inji's thoughts grew heavier. She worried to herself that if they were already facing such dangerous monsters right at the entrance, Then even with both Dojin and Jian on their side, closing this rift would not be easy. Jian then walked toward Dojin and asked what exactly he was staring at. Dojin told her to look carefully. If she focused, she might be able to see the faint black ripple surrounding the orc's body. At first, Jian didn't understand what he meant. Dojin explained further, saying she wouldn't be able to notice it unless she concentrated deeply. Curious, Jian asked what it was. Dojin replied in a grim tone, saying, "That's the reason these monsters have become stronger." Shocked, he muttered to himself, wondering why dark mana was appearing here of all places. Hearing this, Jian, Inji, and the rest of the party froze, their eyes wide in disbelief. The realization that the rift was tainted by dark mana sent chills down their spines. As the party continued to move forward, they worked together to take down monsters along the way. However, to their growing shock, even the lower-ranking monsters such as swamp ghouls were showing unusually high levels of strength. The party members could hardly believe their eyes. When one of the swamp ghouls attacked, they managed to withstand the strike, but one member stared in disbelief when he realized the blow had actually broken through his combat suit. Fear and unease spread among the team as they realized they were in a much more difficult situation than expected. None of them could understand what was happening or why these weaker monsters had suddenly become so dangerous. As the fight continued against the swamp ghoul, one of the party members made a mistake and let his guard down. In that split second, the swamp ghoul lunged and was about to strike him down, but Inji rushed forward just in time. With precision and speed, she intercepted the attack, saving her teammate's life, before landing a counterstrike on the monster. The swamp ghoul staggered but tried to push forward again. Before it could advance toward the group, Inji delivered a swift and powerful strike that completely took the creature down. Inji thought to herself with concern, if even swamp ghouls are this strong, then facing Belkara will be far worse. The possibility unsettled her. She couldn't believe this was simply the rift's natural characteristic. It felt like something more. Could it be that this strange phenomenon was happening not just here, but across rift zones all over the world? The scene then shifted to the rift zone near Manaus. There, we saw the hero from earlier desperately running for his life. Every other hero who had been dispatched with him had already fallen. Even Brazil's Arbado and France's David, both S-rank heroes, had been defeated. The shocking part was that their deaths weren't caused by an army of countless beasts, but by just a few Belkara. It was unthinkable. The strongest had been overwhelmed in moments. Back with Jian and Dojin, the tension continued to rise. Dojin explained to Jian that Belkara infused with dark mana were especially dangerous. Hearing this, Jian recalled the black aura she had seen earlier. She pointed out that the same dark aura surrounded the swamp ghouls as well. Dojin nodded and confirmed that was exactly what was making the monsters stronger. In that moment, Jian charged forward. With a single strike, she brought down a swamp ghoul, shocking the rest of the team with her raw strength and skill. Meanwhile, Dojin continued his explanation. He told Jian to think of black mana as highly concentrated mana pouring into the bodies of monsters, amplifying their strength beyond normal limits. Jian responded by comparing mana to the magic points people needed to cast spells in games. Dojin couldn't help but let out a sigh at her comparison. Frustrated, Jian frowned and asked what the sigh was for. Was she really that annoying to him? Then she pressed further, asking if Dojin truly meant that mana actually existed in the real world. Dojin replied firmly that the biggest difference between heroes and ordinary people was simply whether or not they possessed mana. To emphasize his words, Dojin charged forward and crushed another swamp ghoul with a single devastating punch. In his thoughts, Dojin reflected on the matter. A world without even the concept of mana must have been peaceful, he thought. But as he looked around, he was convinced that peace wouldn't last much longer. Almost immediately after, another swamp ghoul attempted to strike at him. Dojin countered without hesitation, unleashing a flurry of strikes that brought the monster down instantly. The other party members could only stare in disbelief at his overwhelming strength. At that moment, Jian stepped closer and pointed out that the black mana Dojin had mentioned earlier was clearly powering up the monsters around them. Dojin confirmed her suspicion with a nod. Jian then asked curiously how he knew all this. Dojin looked confused and replied bluntly that it was stranger for Jian not to know, as if such knowledge should have been obvious to her. Following Dojin's warnings, the Silkflower Guild slowed their pace once they left the Swamp Ghoul area. He had told them Belkara spawn zones were extremely dangerous, and they took his word seriously. Moving cautiously, they advanced deeper into the rift. Suddenly, Inji spotted something unusual and raised her hand, ordering everyone to stop. Pointing ahead, she told Dojin that they had found it, the Belkara's feeding cocoons. She immediately warned everyone to stay on high alert, since Belkara had to be nearby. But Dojin shook his head. No, he said firmly. He activated his fire spell, his eyes fixed on the cocoons. The real danger is actually right here. It's a good thing we found this quickly. Confused, Inji asked if Dojin was secretly a mage, and what exactly he meant by the cocoons being the real danger. Dojin didn't waste time. He unleashed his fire spell directly at the cocoons. Then he explained to everyone that Belkara, infused with dark mana, used these cocoons to control monsters like puppets. If they didn't destroy the cocoons first, they would soon find themselves surrounded and wiped out in an instant. Thanks to his quick action, they had prevented disaster. Now, their mission was clear. All that remained was to find the Belkara itself and take it down.